Jonas Callahan's hand tightened on the rejection letter in his pocket as the train screeched to a halt. He'd never wanted a mail-order bride. This whole arrangement was his mother's dying wish, not his. But when Selena Carter stepped onto that windswept platform, a single tear cutting through the dust on her cheek, something shifted in his chest like tectonic plates grinding against each other. That tear would change everything. Stay with me, friends, and let me know where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The autumn wind whipped through Iron Ridge Station like a harbinger of change, carrying with it the acrid smell of coal smoke and the distant echo of cattle lowing from the stockyards. Jonas Callahan stood rigid on the platform, his weathered Stetson pulled low against the October sun that hung like a copper penny in the Colorado sky. His calloused fingers worried the edges of the letter in his coat pocket, the one he'd written 3 weeks ago, the one that should have ended this charade before it began. "Train's coming," muttered Tom Brennan, his foreman shifting nervously beside him. Tom knew about the letter. Hell, Tom had helped him write it. Both men bent over Jonas's kitchen table with a bottle of whiskey between them, searching for words that were firm but not cruel. "I know," Jonas replied, his voice rough as sandpaper. He could see the black smoke rising above the ridge, could hear the whistle announcing the 347 from Kansas City. Right on time. His mother would have appreciated that punctuality. She'd always said a person's character could be measured by whether they kept their word about time. But his mother was 6 months in the ground now, and the promise he'd made to her felt like a millstone around his neck. "You don't have to do this," Tom said quietly. "Mary wouldn't want you miserable." Jonas's jaw tightened. Mary Callahan had extracted that promise with her last breath, her fingers cold as winter creek water as they gripped his hand. "Find yourself a good woman, Jonas. This ranch is too big for one man's loneliness." She'd already arranged it all, had been corresponding with some matchmaker in Boston for months before the consumption finally took her. The bride was bought and paid for, purchased with his mother's egg money, like she was ordering a new plow from the Sears catalog. The train rounded the bend, its brass bell clanging as it slowed. Jonas straightened his shoulders, preparing himself for what he had to do. He'd be gentle about it, respectful. He'd pay for her return passage, give her enough money to start fresh somewhere. It wasn't her fault his mother had been meddling from her deathbed. The locomotive hissed to a stop, steam billowing across the platform like morning fog over the valley. Passengers began disembarking, a traveling salesman with a sample case, 2 miners headed for the Silver Claims up north, a family with 3 children who looked road-weary and hopeful. And then he saw her. She stood in the doorway of the second-class car, one gloved hand gripping the rail, the other holding a carpet bag that had seen better days. She was smaller than he'd expected, more delicate somehow, though there was nothing fragile about the way she held herself. Her traveling dress was navy blue wool, carefully mended at the hem and cuffs. He recognized the tight, precise stitches of someone who'd learned to make things last. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple style that spoke of practicality rather than vanity. But it was her face that stopped him cold. She was beautiful, yes, but it wasn't the kind of beauty that demanded attention. It was quieter, like the first star appearing at twilight. Her skin was pale from the long journey, her lips pressed together in determination. And there, sliding down her left cheek like a pearl of sorrow, was a single tear. She wiped it away quickly with the back of her glove, straightened her spine, and stepped down onto the platform with the dignity of a queen entering a hostile court. Her eyes, gray as a storm sky, swept the crowd, searching. Jonas found himself moving forward before he could think, drawn like iron filings to a magnet. The letter in his pocket felt like it was burning through the fabric. Their eyes met. The world seemed to narrow to just that moment, the steam dissipating around them, the noise of the station fading to a whisper. She didn't smile. Neither did he. But something passed between them, some recognition that had nothing to do with photographs or descriptions in letters. "Mr. Callahan." Her voice was softer than he'd expected, with a slight accent he couldn't place. Not quite Eastern, not quite Southern. "Miss Carter." He removed his hat, holding it against his chest. Up close he could see the exhaustion written in the fine lines around her eyes, could see another tear threatening to fall. She blinked it back fiercely. "I apologize for my appearance," she said, lifting her chin. "The journey was more difficult than anticipated." No need for apologies. The words came out gruffer than he intended. He cleared his throat, tried again. You must be tired. I've been more tired, she said, and there was something in her tone that suggested she spoke the truth. Her gaze flickered past him to Tom, then to the wagon waiting beyond the platform. That's yours. Yes, ma'am. She nodded, seemed to steel herself. Then I suppose we should go. This was the moment. This was when he should tell her about the mistake about the letter, about how he couldn't go through with his mother's plan. The words were right there, lined up like soldiers ready to march. But then the afternoon sun caught the moisture still clinging to her lashes, and he saw her hands tremble just slightly before she clasped them together, and the words scattered like startled birds. Tom, he said instead, would you mind getting Miss Carter's trunk? Tom's eyebrows shot up, but he moved toward the baggage car without comment. Just the one bag, Selina said quietly. The trunk didn't make the journey. Lost, stolen, or sold, Jonas didn't ask. He simply picked up her carpet bag, noting how light it was, how little she'd brought to start a new life. The weight of it, or lack thereof, made something twist in his chest. The ranch is about an hour's ride, he said, leading her toward the wagon. Roads rough in places. I don't mind rough roads, Mr. Callahan. He helped her up onto the wagon seat, his hands spanning her waist for just a moment. She was thin, too thin, like she'd been surviving on hope and determination for too long. When she settled her skirts and folded her hands in her lap, he noticed the careful darning on her gloves, the way she held herself so straight it must have hurt. Tom climbed into the back of the wagon with the supplies they'd come to town for flour coffee. Ammunition things needed for the coming winter. Jonas took the reins, released the brake, and clicked his tongue at the horses. They moved forward, wheels creaking, leaving the station behind. They rode in silence for the first few minutes. The only sounds, the clip-clop of hooves, and the distant cry of a red-tailed hawk. Jonas found himself stealing glances at her profile, at the determined set of her jaw, and the way she watched the landscape unfold with genuine interest rather than dismay. It's beautiful, she said suddenly, gesturing toward the mountains rising in the distance, their peaks already crowned with snow. Different from what I expected, but beautiful. Different how... She considered this. I suppose I thought it would be more desolate. But there's life everywhere, isn't there? Even in the harsh places. Especially in the harsh places, Jonas found himself saying. Things that survive out here have to be strong. She turned to look at him fully. Then those gray eyes seen more than he was comfortable with. Yes, she said simply. They do. They passed the Jennings ranch where young Mrs. Jennings was hanging laundry on the line. She stopped to stare as they went by, her mouth falling open slightly. By tomorrow, Jonas knew the whole valley would know he'd actually brought home a mail-order bride. The letter in his pocket seemed to grow heavier. Will there be many social calls? Selina asked, noting the direction of his gaze. Some. Ranch wives get lonely out here. They'll want to meet you. And judge me. It wasn't a question, but Jonas answered anyway. Some will, yes. Others will surprise you with their kindness. I'm familiar with both, she said, and again there was that suggestion of stories untold of a past that had taught her hard lessons. The road began to climb, winding through stands of aspen whose leaves had turned gold as coins. The afternoon light slanted through them, dappling everything with shifting patterns of light and shadow. Jonas noticed how Selina's face softened as she watched the play of light, how for just a moment the tension eased from her shoulders. How long have you been ranching? She asked. All my life. My father started the Triple C when I was 5, built it up from nothing to 1,500 head of cattle before he died. And now it's yours. Now it's mine. He paused. Been mine for 8 years now, since I was 22. That's young to carry such responsibility. Old enough, he said, but he remembered those first years, the weight of decisions, the fear of failure. What about you? What did you do before I became a mail-order bride? There was a slight edge to her voice, not quite bitter, but close. I was a governess in Philadelphia, before that a teacher in Virginia, before that... She trailed off, shook her head. It doesn't matter what came before that. But it did matter, Jonas thought. Whatever came before had put that tear on her cheek, had driven her to take a chance on a stranger half a continent away. They were climbing higher now, the air growing cooler. Jonas reached behind the seat and pulled out a wool blanket, handed it to her without comment. She took it with a murmured thanks, wrapping it around her shoulders. The gesture made her look younger, more vulnerable. "Your mother," she said after a while. Her letters were very kind. Jonas's hands tightened on the reins. She was a good woman. She loved you very much. Every letter was full of pride in what you'd accomplished and the man you'd become. She had her own ideas about what would make me happy. Selina was quiet for a moment. "And you don't think a wife would make you happy?" The question was so direct it caught him off guard. He'd expected dancing around the subject, the kind of polite fiction that allowed people to avoid uncomfortable truths. But she sat there waiting for an answer, the blanket pulled tight around her, looking at him with those storm-gray eyes that seemed to see straight through him. "I think," he said slowly, "that happiness isn't something one person can give another. It's something you build day by day, choice by choice." That's a lonely philosophy. It's a practical one. Practical. She tested the word like she was tasting something unfamiliar. "Your mother said you were practical." She said it like it was both your best quality and your biggest flaw. That sounded exactly like something his mother would say. Jonas felt his lips twitch, almost a smile. She had opinions about everything. Mothers usually do. There was something wistful in her tone that made him wonder about her own mother, but before he could ask, she straightened, pointing ahead. "Is that it? Your ranch?" They had crested the final ridge, and the Triple C spread out before them in the valley below. The main house sat on a rise 2 stories of solid log construction with a stone chimney that his father had built with his own hands. The barn was newer, painted red with the corrals spreading out around it like a spider's web. Beyond that, the bunkhouse for the hands, the smokehouse, the blacksmith shop. And stretching to the horizon, grassland that turned gold in the evening light dotted with cattle that looked like scattered pepper from this distance. "That's it," Jonas said. And despite everything, he couldn't keep the pride from his voice. "It's magnificent." Selina breathed, and she meant it. He could tell she meant it. "You built all this?" "My father started it. I've added to it. The barn, the extra corrals. Bought the Watson place when they moved back east, added another 400 acres. It must take many men to run it all. 8 hands plus Tom as foreman. Good men, most of them. They'll be curious about you." "And what will you tell them?" The question hung in the air between them. What would he tell them? That she was his mail-order bride, that she was temporary, that he hadn't decided yet what she was. "The truth," he said, finally, "that you're Miss Selina Carter from Philadelphia and you're my guest." "Your guest?" she repeated softly. "Not your intended—" There it was, laid bare between them. Jonas pulled the wagon to a stop there on the ridge overlooking his land and turned to face her fully. "Miss Carter, there's something I need to tell you." She held up a hand, stopping him. "You didn't want me to come. You wrote a letter telling me not to, but it must have passed me in transit. I know, Mr. Callahan. I've known since I got on the train in Philadelphia." Jonas felt his mouth drop open. "Then why?" "Because I had nowhere else to go." The words came out steady, but he saw what they cost her in the way her knuckles went white where she gripped the blanket. "Because your mother's letters painted a picture of a place where someone could start over, could build something new. Because sometimes, Mr. Callahan, when you're drowning, you grab whatever hand is extended, even if that hand doesn't want to pull you up." The honesty of it hit him like a physical blow. She wasn't here for love or even for the promise of it. She was here for survival, for a chance, for the same reason his grandfather had come west after the war, because staying where she was meant something worse than the unknown. "What are you running from?" he asked quietly. She looked away out over the valley. "Does it matter? We all have our ghosts, Mr. Callahan. The question is whether we let them define us or whether we build something new despite them." A gust of wind set the aspens trembling, their leaves rustling like whispered secrets. Jonas studied her profile, the proud tilt of her chin, the way she held herself together by will alone. "The house needs work," he heard himself say. "My mother did her best, but she was sick for a long time. The hands have been taking turns cooking, and they're terrible at it. Tom nearly poisoned us all with his attempt at stew last week. She turned back to him, confusion flickering across her features. Mr. Callahan, I'm saying, Miss Carter, that if you wanted to stay for a while as my guest to see if this place suits you, if you suit it, well, the ranch could use someone who knows their way around a kitchen, and the house could use a woman's touch, as my mother used to say. You're offering me a position as a housekeeper. I'm offering you time, Jonas corrected. Time to decide what you want, what you need. Time to catch your breath. No obligations, no expectations, just time. She studied him for a long moment, and he had the uncomfortable feeling she was seeing past all his defenses, all his careful walls, straight to the part of him that had been moved by a single tear on a dusty platform. And what about what you want, Mr. Callahan? I want my hands to stop complaining about the food, he said, aiming for lightness. But then, because she deserved honesty after what she'd given him, he added, and I want to stop eating alone in that big house, listening to the silence where my mother's voice used to be. Something shifted in her expression, a softening that transformed her face. Not pity, he would have hated pity, but understanding. Then I accept your offer of time, Mr. Callahan, and you may call me Selina. Jonas, he said. If we're going to figure this out, you might as well call me Jonas. She nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. It was the first time he'd seen her smile, and it changed everything about her face, like sunrise breaking over the mountains. He clicked the reins, and the wagon started down the slope toward the ranch. As they descended, Jonas found himself stealing glances at her again. This woman who'd stepped off a train with tears in her eyes, and somehow, in the span of an hour, had made him reconsider everything he thought he knew about what he wanted. The sun was setting by the time they reached the ranch proper, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. The hands were bringing in the horses for the evening, and they all stopped to stare as the wagon rolled past. Jonas saw Pete elbow Miguel, saw young Danny's mouth drop open. By tomorrow, the whole valley would be talking. He pulled up in front of the house, set the brake, and came around to help Selina down. This time, when his hands touched her waist, he noticed the way she drew in a breath, the slight flush that colored her cheeks. She wasn't immune to him then. The thought pleased him more than it should have. It's bigger up close, she said, looking up at the house. My father believed in building for the future. Said a man should always have more room than he needs, just in case. In case of what? Family, he'd say. In case of family. She absorbed this, then squared her shoulders. Well then, Mr. Callahan, Jonas, perhaps you should show me the kitchen. If I'm to keep your hands from storming the house with complaints, I should probably start dinner. He carried her carpet bag inside, acutely aware of her following behind him, of the way her presence seemed to fill spaces that had felt empty for months. The house was as he'd left it that morning, clean, but lacking something like a song missing its melody. His mother's touches were everywhere, but fading like echoes, growing quieter with time. The kitchen was large, dominated by a massive cast-iron stove that his mother had insisted on importing from Chicago. Copper pots hung from hooks on the wall, and the long wooden table could seat 12, though it rarely held more than one these days. Selina moved through the space like she was reading it, running her fingers along the counters, checking the pantry, testing the pump at the sink. It's well equipped, she said approvingly. Your mother knew what she was about. She loved to cook. Said it was the heart of a home. She was right. Selina had found an apron hanging on a peg, tied it around her waist with practiced efficiency. What time do the hands usually eat? 6 o'clock in the bunkhouse. I eat here. Alone? Usually. She nodded, already pulling items from the pantry. How many am I cooking for tonight? 8 hands, Tom, myself. He hesitated. And you? 11 then. She was examining the supplies with a critical eye. I can work with this. Beef stew biscuits, maybe a pie if there are preserved peaches. Top shelf in the back. She had to stretch to reach them, and Jonas found himself noticing the curve of her neck, the way wisps of dark hair had escaped from their pins. He forced himself to look away. I should check on the horses, he said abruptly. Of course. She was already busy pulling down bowls and measuring flour. Jonas, what time would you prefer to eat? It was such a simple question, such a domestic question, but it made something tighten in his throat. 7, if that suits you. 7 it is. He left her there in his mother's kitchen, humming something soft and low as she worked. The sound followed him out into the yard where Tom was waiting with a knowing grin. So you sending her back? Jonas pulled off his hat, ran a hand through his hair. She's staying for a while. As a guest. A guest who cooks. Tom, I'm just saying that's a mighty particular kind of guest. Tom's expression grew more serious. She seems like a lady, Jonas, a real lady despite the mended clothes. You can see it in the way she carries herself. I know. She's running from something. I know that too. Tom studied him for a moment. Your mother would be pleased. My mother would be planning the wedding already. And would that be such a bad thing? Jonas didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Because he kept seeing that tear on her cheek, kept hearing her say she'd grabbed whatever hand was extended. She didn't need a husband. She needed a safe harbor, a place to rest, a chance to be something more than desperate. And maybe, just maybe, he needed to learn that building a life didn't have to be a solitary endeavor. The smell of baking biscuits drifted from the kitchen, and for the first time in 6 months, the house felt alive again. Jonas watched the sun sink behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of purple and rose, and wondered what he'd set in motion by not giving her that letter. Inside, he could hear Selena moving around the kitchen, the clatter of pots and pans that had been silent too long. One of the barn cats had apparently followed her in. He could hear her talking to it softly, the kind of one-sided conversation lonely people had with animals. It made him wonder how long she'd been alone, how far she'd traveled, not just in miles, but in hope. Boss? It was Danny, the youngest of his hands, barely 18, and still growing into his height. Tom says there's a lady. Miss Carter. Yes, she'll be staying for a while helping with the house. Danny's face lit up. A real lady from back east. From Philadelphia. I never met anyone from Philadelphia. The boy's excitement was almost comical. Is she pretty? Jonas found himself bristling at the question, which was ridiculous. She's a guest, Danny, and you'll treat her with respect. Of course, boss. I didn't mean nothing by it. Jonas softened, remembering being 18 and fascinated by anything in skirts. I know, son. Just remember your manners. Yes, sir. Danny hesitated. It's been real quiet around here since your ma passed. It'll be nice to have a lady around again. The boy scampered off before Jonas could respond, but his words lingered. It had been quiet. More than quiet, it had been hollow, like a drum with no resonance. Jonas had filled the silence with work, pushing himself in the ranch harder than ever, as if he could outrun the loneliness by staying busy enough. But now there was humming coming from the kitchen, and the smell of home cooking, and a woman with gray eyes who saw too much and said exactly what she thought. He made his rounds, checking on the horses, reviewing tomorrow's work with Tom, all the routine tasks that structured his days. But his mind kept drifting to the house, to what was happening in that kitchen, to the way Selena had looked standing in the doorway of the train car, small and brave and alone. At 5:45, Tom rang the dinner bell, and the hands came streaming in from the corrals and the bunkhouse faces, eager with curiosity. Jonas watched from the barn door as Selena emerged from the house carrying a massive pot, her face flushed from the heat of the stove. She'd tidied her hair and removed the apron, looking every inch the proper Eastern lady despite her mended dress. The hands fell silent as she approached 8 rough men, suddenly remembering their mother's lessons about behavior in the presence of a lady. Pete actually removed his hat and smacked Danny when he didn't do the same fast enough. Good evening, gentlemen. Selena said, her voice carrying clearly across the yard. I'm Miss Carter. I understand you've been suffering through each other's cooking for some time now. Yes, ma'am, Tom said, stepping forward to take the pot from her. Suffering is the right word for it. Well, I hope this is an improvement. Beef stew, biscuits in the basket there, and pie for dessert if you have room. Pie? Miguel's voice came out almost reverent. We haven't had pie since... He trailed off, glancing at Jonas. Since Mrs. Callahan passed, Selena finished gently. I'm sure she would want you to enjoy pie again. Tom, could you help me bring out the rest? Tom followed her back to the house like an eager puppy, and Jonas heard Pete mutter, If she can cook half as good as she smells, boys, we're in for a treat. They set up the food on the long table outside the bunkhouse the way Mary Callahan used to do for special occasions. The hands filled their plates with barely concealed eagerness, and at the first bite of stew a collective sigh went up that would have been comical if Jonas hadn't understood it completely. It was good, really good. The beef was tender, the vegetables cooked just right, the gravy rich and seasoned perfectly. "Miss Carteret," Tom said after his third biscuit, "I don't suppose you're planning on staying long." She glanced at Jonas before answering. "That remains to be seen, Mr. Brennan." "Well, if Jonas doesn't convince you to stay, we might have to revolt," Pete said, then quickly added, "Respectfully, of course." That got a small laugh from her, a sound like water over stones. "I'll take that as a compliment, Mr. Pete Hawkins, ma'am, and this here's Miguel, Danny, Sam, Chuck, Bill, Fred, and Little Joe." Each man nodded as his name was called, Little Joe grinning despite the nickname that didn't fit his 6'4" frame. "Pleased to meet you all," Selena said, and she seemed to mean it. "I hope you'll be patient with me as I learn the rhythms of the ranch." "Ma'am," Miguel said shyly, "you could burn everything for a week, and it'd still be better than Tom's cooking." "Hey now," Tom protested, but he was grinning. The easy camaraderie surprised Jonas. He'd expected awkwardness, the kind of stilted interaction that happened when worlds collided. But Selena had a gift for making people comfortable asking the right questions, laughing at their stories, deflecting their curiosity with grace. "You really from Philadelphia?" Danny asked, eyes wide. "I am. Have you ever been—" "No, ma'am. Never been east of Kansas City." "Well, Mr. Danny, I have to say the view here beats anything Philadelphia has to offer." The boy blushed to his hairline at being called Mr. Danny, and the other hands ribbed him good-naturedly. As the sun set completely and the stars began to appear, Jonas realized he should probably rescue Selena from the interrogation, however friendly. "Miss Carter, we should be getting back. You've had a long day." "Of course." She stood smoothing her skirts. "Breakfast is at 5:30, I assume?" "Yes, ma'am," Tom answered. "If that's not too early—" "I've been rising before dawn for years, Mr. Brennan. 5:30 is perfectly fine." She looked around at all of them. "Is there anything particular you'd like for breakfast, I mean?" The hands exchanged glances like they'd been asked to name their heart's desire. "Flapjacks," Danny ventured hopefully. "With bacon," Pete added. "And eggs," Miguel suggested. "And coffee that doesn't taste like Tom boiled his boots in it," Sam finished. "I heard that," Tom protested. Selena smiled. "Flapjacks, bacon, eggs, and proper coffee. Consider it done." As Jonas walked her back to the house, he could hear the hands talking excitedly behind them. In one evening, she'd given them something they hadn't even realized they'd been missing. Not just good food, but the civilizing presence of a woman. Someone to mind their manners, for someone to make them feel like more than just ranch hands. "They're good men," Selena said as they reached the porch. "They are. Rough around the edges, but loyal. Loyalty born of respect, I think. They respect you. They respect the ranch." She stopped at the door, turned to face him. "No, Jonas. They respect you. There's a difference." In the lamplight spilling from the windows, her face was soft, younger looking. The exhaustion from earlier had been replaced by something else, satisfaction maybe, or the particular tiredness that came from useful work. "I should show you to your room," Jonas said. "You must be tired." "I am," she admitted. "But it's a good tired. I haven't felt useful in a very long time." He led her upstairs to the guest room at the end of the hall, the one with the best view of the mountains. His mother had kept it ready for visitors who rarely came with a quilted coverlet and curtains she'd made herself. He'd aired it out that morning, not knowing why, just feeling like it needed doing. "It's lovely," Selena said, setting down her carpetbag. "Your mother's work?" "The quilt and curtains, yes." She had a good eye for color. She ran her hand over the quilt, tracing the pattern. "This must have taken her months." She worked on it during her first winter here, said it kept her hands busy while she learned to be a rancher's wife. "Was it difficult for her?" "The adjustment?" Jonas considered the question. "She came from Ohio from a small farm. This was bigger, wilder, but she had my father, and they were a team." Made it easier, I think. Yes, Selina said softly. I imagine it would. An awkward silence fell between them. They were alone in a bedroom, the bed between them like an accusation. Jonas cleared his throat. There's water in the pitcher, and the necessary is out back. I'll bank the stove before I turn in, but if you get cold, I'll be fine, Jonas. I've slept in colder places. Again, that hint of stories untold. He wanted to ask, wanted to know what had driven her to answer a dead woman's letters to board a train to marry a stranger. But it felt too soon, too intimate for their first day. Then I'll say goodnight. Jonas, she called as he reached the door. Thank you. For the time. For not sending me back immediately. You might not thank me come February when the snow's 6 feet deep and you haven't seen another woman in months. I might surprise you. Looking at her standing there in his mother's guest room, her chin lifted despite her exhaustion, her gray eyes steady on his. Jonas thought she probably would surprise him. She already had. He went back downstairs, sat at the kitchen table where she'd left a plate for him still warm. The stew was even better than what the hands had gotten. She'd added something extra, some herb or spice that elevated it from good to extraordinary. The biscuits were light as air, the pie sweet and perfect. Jonas ate slowly, savoring each bite, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling for the night, horses nickering in the barn, the wind picking up outside the old house creaking around him. But underneath those familiar sounds was something new. Footsteps above him as Selina moved around the guest room, the soft splash of water as she washed the gentle creak of the bed as she settled in. He lived alone in this house for 6 months, had gotten used to being the only heartbeat within its walls. Now there was another person under his roof, a woman with secrets and sadness who cooked like an angel and made his rough ranch hands remember their manners. Jonas pulled out the letter he'd written, the one telling her not to come. He read it over in the lamplight, all his logical reasons for refusing this arrangement, all his careful arguments about incompatibility and the unfairness of forced marriages. Every word of it was true, sensible, practical. He fed it to the stove, watched it curl and blacken and disappear. Tomorrow would bring questions from the town, from the other ranchers, from Selina herself. There would be complications, difficulties, all the challenges that came from two strangers trying to navigate shared space and uncertain futures. But tonight, for the first time in 6 months, the house didn't feel empty. Tonight there was someone else breathing in the darkness, someone else's dreams filling the rooms. It wasn't love. Jonas wasn't fool enough to call it that. But it was something, a beginning, maybe, a possibility. Outside, a coyote howled in the distance, and its pack answered their voices, weaving together in a wild harmony that spoke of hunt and home and the fierce beauty of survival. Jonas listened to them sing, thinking about Selina's words on the wagon. Things that survive out here have to be strong. She was strong. He'd seen that from the moment she'd stepped off the train. But strength alone wasn't always enough. Sometimes you needed a place to rest, a chance to heal, a hand extended, even if it was uncertain. He climbed the stairs quietly, paused outside her door. No light showed underneath, no sound came from within. She was sleeping, this stranger who'd traveled so far on the promise of a dead woman's letters. Tomorrow they'd have to figure out what came next, how to navigate this strange arrangement that was neither employment nor engagement, but something in between. But tonight she was safe under his roof, and somehow that felt right. Like his father building a house too big for his immediate needs, preparing for a future he couldn't quite see, but believed in anyway. Jonas went to his own room, lay down fully clothed on top of the covers, and stared at the ceiling. Through the wall, he could hear the soft rhythm of her breathing, the occasional rustle as she shifted in sleep. It was oddly comforting, that sound of another person existing nearby. He thought about that tear on her cheek, the one that had changed everything. One tear falling at exactly the right moment, catching exactly the right light. His mother would have called it providence. Jonas wasn't sure he believed in providence, but he believed in something, call it chance, call it fate, call it two lonely people finding each other at the exact moment they both needed finding. The wind picked up outside, rattling the windows, bringing with it the smell of coming rain. Good for the grass, good for the cattle, good for washing things clean and starting fresh. Jonas closed his eyes. Let the sound of rain beginning to fall on the roof mingle with the sound of Selina's breathing and for the first time since his mother died, didn't feel alone in the darkness. Tomorrow would come with its questions and challenges. But tonight, there was rain on the roof and a woman sleeping down the hall, and that was enough. More than enough. It was a beginning. The rain that had started during the night continued into morning, a steady drumming that turned the ranch yard to mud and made the mountains disappear behind a veil of gray. Jonas woke before dawn, as was his habit, but lay still for a moment listening. There it was, movement in the kitchen below the soft clatter of pots, the scrape of a chair. Selina was already up, already working. He dressed quickly and made his way downstairs, pausing in the doorway to watch her. She moved through the kitchen with an economy of motion that spoke of years of practice. Her hair pinned up neatly despite the early hour, a clean apron protecting her mended dress. She was mixing batter in a large bowl, her movements rhythmic, almost meditative. "You're up early," he said. She didn't startle, just glanced over her shoulder with a small smile. "Ranch time starts before city time, I'm learning. Coffee's ready if you want some." He poured himself the cup, noted how she'd already figured out where everything was, how she'd organized the workspace to her liking. The coffee was strong, but not bitter, with a richness Tom's boot-leather brew had never achieved. "Did you sleep well?" he asked, leaning against the counter. "Better than I have in months," she admitted, then seemed surprised by her own honesty. "The rain helps. It sounds different here than in the city cleaner somehow. Everything's cleaner here. Even the mud." That earned him a soft laugh. "I'm not sure your boots would agree after you've been out in it." As if summoned by her words, Tom appeared at the back door, water streaming from his slicker, his boots indeed caked with mud. "Morning, Miss Carter Jonas. That coffee I smell." "It is Mr. Brennan. Leave those boots on the porch if you please. I'll not have you tracking mud through my clean kitchen." Tom's eyebrows rose at my clean kitchen, but he obediently sat on the porch step to pull off his boots. Jonas hid a smile behind his coffee cup. Less than 24 hours and she was already taking charge. "Rain's good for the grass," Tom said, padding into the kitchen in his socks. "But it's going to make moving the herd to the north pasture a muddy business." "Can it wait?" Jonas asked. "Another day, maybe two, but Anderson's been eyeing that grass. If we don't get our cattle up there soon, Anderson can eye all he wants. That's Triple C land." Jonas's voice carried an edge that made Selina glance at him curiously. "Who's Anderson?" she asked, flipping flapjacks on the griddle with practiced ease. "Neighbor to the north," Tom answered when Jonas didn't. "Owns the Rocking A, has different ideas about property lines than the rest of us." "He's a cattle thief is what he is," Jonas said flatly. "Just hasn't been caught at it yet." Selina absorbed this information while plating the flapjacks. "And the law? Sheriff Bradley's good people, but he needs proof. Anderson's too smart to leave any." "Smart or lucky?" "Maybe both." The hands began filing and shaking water from their hats, their faces lighting up at the smell of breakfast. Danny practically bounced on his toes when he saw the stack of flapjacks. "Miss Carter, you're an angel," Pete declared, taking his first bite. "Just a woman who knows her way around a griddle, Mr. Hawkins." As the men ate, Jonas noticed how Selina kept the coffee hot, the flapjacks coming the eggs cooked exactly as each man preferred, without having to ask twice. She had a gift for remembering details, for anticipating needs. It made him wonder what kind of life had taught her such careful attention. "Miss Carter," Miguel ventured, "where'd you learn to cook like this?" "Various places," she said, which wasn't really an answer. "My mother started teaching me when I was very young. She said a woman who could cook would never go hungry." "Wise woman," Tom commented. "She was." The past tense hung in the air final as a closing door. After breakfast, the hands dispersed to their work despite the rain. Jonas lingered watching Selina clean up with the same efficient grace she'd shown cooking. "You don't have to do everything yourself," he said. "I could hire a girl from town to help." "I prefer to keep busy." She paused in her washing. "Idle hands lead to idle thoughts, and idle thoughts lead to—" She trailed off, shook her head. "I prefer to keep busy." "And what thoughts are you avoiding, Selina?" She turned to look at him fully, her gray eyes unreadable. "The same ones you're avoiding by working yourself into exhaustion every day, I expect." The accuracy of it stung. You don't know me well enough to make that judgment. Don't I? You live alone in a house built for a family. You eat alone rather than with your men. You have the look of someone who's been running from ghosts so long you've forgotten what it's like to stand still. And you recognize that look because I see it in the mirror every morning. They stood there facing each other across the kitchen, two people who'd seen too much, lost too much, fled too much. The rain intensified, hammering against the windows like it wanted in. I need to check the stock, Jonas said finally, and I need to start thinking about lunch. But as he turned to go, she called after him, Jonas, be careful out there. The rain makes everything slippery. It was such a simple thing, that small expression of concern, but it followed him out into the storm like a warm hand on his shoulder. The morning passed in a blur of wet work, checking fences, moving horses to higher ground, making sure the creek wasn't rising too fast. Anderson's men were out too. Jonas could see them along the property line, watching, always watching. He made sure to ride close enough for them to see him to know the Triple C was defended. When he returned for lunch, soaked through and shivering, he found Selena had laid out dry clothes by the stove and had hot soup waiting. You're going to catch your death, she scolded, handing him a towel. I've been working in weather like this since I was 10. And I suppose that makes you immortal. She turned her back while he changed, busying herself at the stove. Men, you all think you're made of iron until you're flat on your backs with fever. Speaking from experience, my brother thought the same way. Her voice went quiet. He was wrong. Before Jonas could ask more, she was moving again, ladling soup into bowls, slicing fresh bread she'd somehow found time to bake. This is too much, he said, gesturing at the spread. You don't need to, don't I? When was the last time you ate a proper lunch? And don't tell me beef jerky counts as a meal. He couldn't remember, actually. Since his mother died, meals had become fuel, nothing more. But this, the hot soup warming him from the inside, the fresh bread with butter, Selena moving around the kitchen like she belonged there, this was something else entirely. Tell me about Philadelphia, he said, wanting to know more about her, wanting to understand what had driven her here. She sat across from him, her own bowl untouched. What would you like to know, Seth? What was your life there, constrained? She picked up her spoon, set it down again. I was a governess for the Whitmore family. 3 children all sweet enough, but their mother. She had very specific ideas about propriety, about place. And your place was somewhere between family and furniture, visible when needed, invisible otherwise, speaking when spoken to, grateful for the privilege of serving. Bitterness crept into her tone. 6 years I gave them, 6 years of perfect service. Then young Mr. Whitmore decided he was interested in more than my teaching abilities. Jonas's hands tightened on his spoon. He forced himself on you. He tried. I defended myself with a fireplace poker, left quite a mark on his handsome face. A grim smile flickered across her features. His mother dismissed me immediately, of course, without references, said I was a danger to decent families. But you were defending yourself. That's not how the world works for women like me, Jonas. Women without money, without connections, without power. My word against theirs meant nothing. Every door in Philadelphia closed to me overnight. So you answered my mother's advertisement. I was down to my last $3. The choice was your mother's offer or, she shrugged. Well, there weren't many other choices that left a woman with any dignity intact. The rain had softened to a drizzle-gray light filtering through the windows. Jonas studied her face, seeing new lines of hardship he hadn't noticed before, understanding now the desperation that had driven her to take such a chance. You're safe here, he said quietly. Whatever else happens, you need to know that. You're safe. She looked up at him then, and something passed between them. Not attraction exactly, though that was there too, but recognition. 2 damaged people seeing themselves reflected in each other's eyes. Am I, she asked, a single woman in a house with a single man? No chaperone, no proper arrangement. How long before the town starts talking? How long before my reputation here is as ruined as it was in Philadelphia? She was right, of course. He'd been so focused on giving her time, giving them both time, that he hadn't considered the implications. Iron Ridge might be frontier, but it had its proprieties too. We could tell people you're my housekeeper. who lives in the main house instead of separate quarters, who arrived as your mail-order bride, Jonas. Everyone at that train station saw me arrive. They know why I'm here." He pushed back from the table, paced to the window. Outside, Tom and the boys were bringing in horses, their shapes blurred by rain and distance. Normal ranch work on a normal day, except nothing about this was normal anymore. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. "I can't send you away, not after seeing that tear, not after hearing your story, not after watching you make my empty house feel alive again. I won't send you away. I'm not asking you to." She came to stand beside him at the window. "I'm just saying we need to decide what we're doing before the decision is made for us." "The ladies will come calling soon," Jonas acknowledged. "Mrs. Jennings, Mrs. Patterson, probably the minister's wife. They'll want to know your intentions." "Our intentions," Selina corrected. "This arrangement reflects on you too." He turned to look at her standing so close he could smell the flour and vanilla that clung to her from the morning's baking. "And what are our intentions?" "I don't know." It came out as barely a whisper. "I came here expecting a marriage of convenience to a stranger. Instead, I found," she gestured helplessly, "this, you, a chance to breathe. I don't want to lose that, but I don't want to trap you either." "You're not trapping me. Aren't I? Every day I stay here unmarried damages both our reputations. Every day I stay here, the expectation grows. Your mother's ghost is practically planning the wedding from beyond." Despite everything, Jonas found himself almost smiling. She probably is. They stood there shoulder to shoulder, watching the rain wash the world clean. Finally, Selina spoke again. "I have a proposition. Another one. A clarification, perhaps. We continue as we are. I cook. I keep house. I make your ranch hands happy with proper meals. We tell people we're engaged, a long engagement, getting to know each other. It's not entirely a lie. And if we decide we don't suit, then I've had time to save money from my position here, time to establish myself as respectable, time to find another situation. And you've had time to find a reason for breaking an engagement that doesn't destroy either of our reputations." It was practical, logical, everything Jonas usually appreciated. So why did the thought of her leaving, even as a possibility, make his chest tight? "All right, well," he said. "A long engagement. But Selina?" "Yes. You're not my employee. You're not my servant. If we're doing this, we're doing it as equals. You don't answer to me any more than I answer to you." She turned to face him, fully surprise flickering across her features. "Most men wouldn't see it that way." "I'm not most men." "No?" she said softly. "You're not." A knock at the door interrupted whatever might have come next. Tom stood on the porch, water still dripping from his hat. "Boss, we got a problem. Anderson's men cut the fence on the north pasture. We got cattle scattered from here to Sunday." Jonas cursed, already reaching for his coat. "How many? Maybe 30 head. In this rain, tracking them's going to be hell. Saddle up everyone we can spare. We need to get them back before Anderson claims them as strays," Tom finished grimly. "Already sent Danny for Sheriff Bradley, but you know how that'll go." Jonas turned to Selina. "I have to go," she said simply. "I'll have hot food ready when you get back." He grabbed his hat, then paused. "Bar the doors while we're gone. If Anderson's men come here—" "I still have that fireplace poker," she said with a slight smile. "Go get your cattle, Jonas." He rode out into the storm with Tom and 5 of the hands, leaving only old Fred and little Joe to watch the ranch. The rain had turned the ground to soup, making tracking difficult, but not impossible. Anderson's men had been sloppy, leaving clear signs of where they'd driven the cattle. They found the first group of 10 sheltering in a grove of cottonwoods, Triple C brands clear on their flanks. The second group was harder, scattered across a meadow that bordered Anderson's land. And there, bold as brass, were Anderson's men trying to herd them across the property line. "That's far enough, Hayes," Jonas called to Anderson's foreman. Hayes turned in his saddle rein, running off his hat brim. "These cattle were on Rocking A land. Mr. Anderson's within his rights. Those are Triple C brands, and you know it. Brands can be changed." The threat hung in the air between them. Jonas's hand moved to his rifle, still in its scabbard, but ready. "Try it. he said quietly. Please give me a reason. Tom and the others spread out flanking Anderson's men. The tension stretched taut as wet leather, everyone waiting for someone else to make the first move. This isn't over, Callahan, Hayes finally said. Mr. Anderson doesn't like thieves. Neither do I, Jonas replied, which is why I'd appreciate you getting off my land. Hayes wheeled his horse around his men, following. They rode away slowly, insolently, making it clear they were leaving by choice, not force. This is escalating, Tom said once they were gone. I know. He's testing you, seeing how far he can push. I know that too. They spent the rest of the afternoon gathering the scattered cattle, 32 head in total, all accounted for, but spooked and difficult. By the time they got them back to Triple C pastures, it was near dark, and they were all soaked to the skin. As promised, Selena had hot food waiting venison stew that filled the kitchen with rich aromas, cornbread, apple cobbler that made Danny actually moan with pleasure. She served the hands first, making sure everyone was fed before sitting down herself. No trouble here, Jonas asked, finally warm and dry in fresh clothes. Define trouble. Selena. Mrs. Jennings came calling, also Mrs. Patterson and Mrs. Wheeler, together, like a delegation. Jonas winced. And I served them tea in the parlor, told them how pleased I was to be here, how kind you'd been, how we were taking time to get to know each other properly before setting a date. They believed you. Mrs. Jennings was skeptical. Mrs. Patterson seemed disappointed there wasn't more scandal. Mrs. Wheeler invited me to church on Sunday. She paused. I accepted. You don't have to. Yes, I do. If we're maintaining this fiction, I need to be seen as respectable. Church is part of that. No, I haven't been since Ma died. Then perhaps it's time you started again. She began clearing plates, her movements sharp. We're supposed to be engaged, Jonas. Engaged couples attend church together. He caught her wrist as she reached for his plate. Are you all right? Those women looked at me like I was either a fortune hunter or a fallen woman. Some clearly thought both. She pulled free of his grip. I've been looked at like that before. I survived it then. I'll survive it now. I'm sorry. For what? For giving me a chance, for treating me with respect. You have nothing to apologize for. She softened slightly. It's just been a long day. For both of us. They finished cleaning up in companionable silence, moving around each other with surprising ease. Jonas found himself aware of every small thing, the way she hummed when she washed dishes, the loose curl that escaped her pins and brushed her neck, the grace in her movements despite her obvious fatigue. I should tell you something, Selena said as they finished, about my past. You don't owe me. I do if we're to continue this arrangement. She dried her hands carefully, precisely. My brother, the one I mentioned, he didn't die of illness. Jonas waited, sensing the weight of what was coming. He was murdered, shot in the back by our cousin over an inheritance dispute. Our grandfather had left everything to James and me, you see. Clayton thought it should have been his. Was he arrested? Clayton claimed it was a hunting accident. He had witnesses, friends of his, who'd say anything for money. The law believed him. Her voice was steady, but her knuckles were white where she gripped the dish towel. He inherited everything. I was 17, suddenly penniless, suddenly alone. Selena. That's why I became a governess. It was that or Clayton's protection, which came with conditions I couldn't accept. She met his eyes. I'm telling you this because Clayton has been looking for me. He found out about some documents, proof that he forged our grandfather's will. I have them hidden, but if he finds me, he won't touch you here? You can't promise that. I can, and I do. Jonas moved closer, close enough to see the fear she'd been hiding beneath her composure. This is my land, my town. If this Clayton comes here, he'll learn what frontier justice means. You don't even know me, not really. Why would you risk? Because you stepped off that train ready to face whatever came next, even with tears on your face. Because you've made my men smile for the first time in months. Because you stood up to a man who tried to assault you, consequences be damned. He paused, then admitted, because when you're here, this house feels like a home again. She looked up at him, those gray eyes wide and vulnerable. Jonas? I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. I'm just saying you're not alone anymore. Whatever comes, we'll face it. You sound very sure. I am. She reached up, touched his cheek briefly, her fingers warm against his skin. You're a good man, Jonas Callahan. Your mother was right about that. Before he could respond, she was moving away, heading for the stairs. I should rest. Tomorrow's laundry day, and I have a feeling your ranch hands generate quite a bit of it. Selena. She paused at the bottom of the stairs. Thank you for dinner, for handling the ladies, for staying. A small smile touched her lips. Thank you for giving me a reason to. After she went upstairs, Jonas sat in his father's old chair by the fire, thinking about the day's events. Anderson's aggression was escalating, that was certain. But somehow, that seemed less pressing than the woman upstairs, the one with secrets and sadness, who was slowly bringing his house back to life. He thought about their conversation about the engagement fiction they'd agreed to maintain. It was practical, sensible, a good solution to a complicated problem. So why did calling it a fiction feel like a lie? The next few days fell into a rhythm. Selena rose early to cook breakfast. Jonas and the men worked the ranch, she kept the house, and had meals ready when they returned. But there were small changes. She laughed more readily. He found excuses to linger in the kitchen. They talked over dinner about everything and nothing. The hands had fully adopted her. Pete taught her to play poker. She was surprisingly good at it. Miguel shared stories of his childhood in Mexico that made her eyes soft with sympathy. Danny followed her around like a puppy whenever she'd let him. Even taciturn Fred opened up to her, sharing memories of his wife who'd died 10 years back. She's good for this place, Tom told Jonas one evening as they repaired tack in the barn. Good for you too. It's temporary, Tom. Is it? Tom's knowing look was irritating. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like two people finding something they didn't know they were looking for. It's complicated. Best things usually are. On Saturday, Selena spent the day preparing for church, pressing her one good dress, polishing her boots until they shone. Jonas watched her nervous preparations with growing unease. We don't have to go, he said over dinner. Yes, we do. I told Mrs. Wheeler we'd be there. Our absence would be noted and discussed. Let them discuss. She set down her fork, looked at him seriously. Jonas, I know you're used to not caring what people think. It's a luxury men have. But my reputation is all I have. If we're maintaining this engagement story, we need to be seen together acting like a proper couple. And what does a proper couple act like? They sit together at church. They take walks. He carries her packages when they're in town. She takes his arm when they walk. They look at each other like what? Like there's possibility between them. The words hung in the air, loaded with meaning. Neither of them was ready to acknowledge. Sunday dawned bright and clear, the first sunshine in a week. Jonas put on his church clothes, pants, and jacket. His mother had insisted he own, and found Selena waiting in the kitchen, her good dress pressed perfect, her hair arranged in a style more elaborate than her usual practical bun. You look... He stopped, unsure how to finish without crossing some invisible line. Presentable, beautiful. The word escaped before he could stop it. Color rose in her cheeks, but she smiled. You clean up rather well yourself, Mr. Callahan. The ride to town was quiet, both of them aware of what this represented, their first public appearance as an engaged couple. Jonas could feel Selena's tension in the way she held herself rigid and careful. Relax, he said quietly. They're just people. People who will judge every word, every gesture, every look between us. Then let's give them something to talk about. He pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the church, came around to help her down. But instead of just offering his hand, he put both hands on her waist, lifted her down slowly, letting her slide against him until her feet touched the ground. Her breath caught her hands, gripping his shoulders for balance. Jonas, she whispered, people are watching. Good. He offered her his arm, felt her fingers curl around it, and walked her into church like she was precious, like she was his. The whispers started immediately. Jonas ignored them, guiding Selena to his family pew, the one that had sat empty since his mother's funeral. She settled beside him close enough that he could smell her soap, something floral and clean. Reverend Mills looked pleased to see them, offering a warm smile before beginning his sermon about renewal and second chances. Jonas barely heard a word, too aware of Selina beside him, of the way sunlight through the windows caught in her hair, of her gloved hand resting inches from his. Halfway through the service, she shifted slightly, her shoulder pressing against his. Such a small thing, but it felt like a declaration. He moved his hand to cover hers, a silent reassurance. She turned her palm up, laced her fingers through his. They sat like that through the rest of the service, hands linked, presenting a united front to the curious congregation. But Jonas knew, and he suspected Selina knew too, that something had shifted between them. This wasn't just performance anymore. After church, the ladies descended on Selina like chickens on scattered corn. He tried to stay close, but Mayor Patterson cornered him about water rights, and by the time he extracted himself, Selina was surrounded by a gaggle of women all talking at once. He started toward her, but Tom appeared at his elbow. "Let her handle it. She needs to establish herself with them. They could eat her alive. Look closer." Jonas did and realized Selina wasn't overwhelmed. She was managing them, answering questions with just enough information to satisfy without revealing too much, deflecting the intrusive ones with grace, even making Mrs. Jennings laugh at something. "She's tougher than she looks," Tom observed. "Yes," Jonas agreed, pride warming his chest. "She is." But then he saw Anderson across the churchyard watching Selina with an expression that made Jonas's blood run cold. The rancher said something to Hayes, who nodded and started walking toward the group of ladies. Jonas moved, immediately reaching them just as Hayes was introducing himself to Selina. "Miss Carter, I'm Dave Hayes, foreman at the Rocking A. Mr. Anderson wanted me to welcome you to Iron Ridge." "How kind." Selina replied, her voice neutral. "He also wanted me to extend an invitation to Sunday dinner at the Rocking A. He likes to know his neighbors." "I'm afraid Miss Carter already has plans," Jonas said, putting a possessive hand on her lower back. Hayes' smile didn't reach his eyes. "Another time, perhaps. Mr. Anderson is very persistent in his hospitality." "And I'm very persistent in protecting what's mine," Jonas replied quietly. The two men stared at each other for a long moment before Hayes touched his hat brim and walked away. "What was that about?" Selina asked as they walked to the wagon. "Anderson trying to mark territory." "I'm not territory to be marked." "No," Jonas agreed, helping her into the wagon. "But Anderson doesn't know that. He sees something he thinks he can use against me." "Use how?" Jonas didn't answer immediately, focusing on navigating the wagon through town. But once they were on the road home, he said, "Anderson wants my land, has for years. He'll use any leverage he can find, including me. Especially you, a woman alone out here, even an engaged one. You're vulnerable in ways I'm not." Selina was quiet for a moment. Then, "I've been vulnerable before. I survived." "You shouldn't have to just survive, not anymore." She looked at him with those storm-gray eyes that saw too much. "What are you saying, Jonas?" "I'm saying maybe this engagement doesn't have to be fiction." The words hung between them like a challenge. Selina turned to look at the road ahead, her profile unreadable. "You don't mean that." "Don't I?" "Jonas, we've known each other less than a week. My parents knew each other 3 days before they married. That was different." "How, They chose each other. We're two lonely people thrown together by circumstance. Is that all we are?" She turned to him, then eyes bright with unshed tears. "I don't know. I don't know what we are or what we could be. I just know that when I'm with you, I feel safe for the first time in years. And that terrifies me." "Why?" "Because safe things can be taken away. Because every time I've trusted, I've been hurt. Because you're offering something I want so badly, it scares me." Jonas pulled the wagon to a stop there on the empty road with the mountains rising around them. "Selina, look at me." She did reluctantly. "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not going to send you away. I'm not going to let anyone, not Anderson, not this Clayton you're running from, not anyone take you from here unless you want to go. You can't promise that." "I just did." "Jonas, marry me." The words surprised them both. Selina's mouth fell open, her eyes wide with shock. "Not today," Jonas continued quickly. "Not tomorrow, but soon. Make this real, this thing between us. give it a chance to become what it could be. You don't love me? No, he agreed. But I could. I think I'm already starting to, and that's more than most marriages start with out here. This is insane. Is it? You need protection, security, a home. I need, God, Selena, I need you. The way you've brought life back to that house, the way you make my men stand straighter and work harder just to earn your smile, the way you look at me like I'm worth something more than just this ranch. You are worth more. See that, right there. The way you say that, like it's obvious, like it's true. He took her hands, pulled off her gloves so he could feel her skin against his. Marry me, Selena. Not because my mother arranged it, not because you have nowhere else to go, but because we could build something good together, something real. She was crying now, tears sliding down her cheeks like that first day at the station. But these were different tears, complicated tears, tears that held fear and hope in equal measure. I don't know how to be a wife, she whispered. I don't know how to be a husband. We'll learn together. What if we fail? What if we don't? She laughed through her tears, a sound like breaking ice. You're impossible. Is that a yes? It's a maybe. It's a give me time to think. I can work with maybe. He lifted her hands to his lips, kissed each palm gently. She shivered, leaning toward him slightly. Jonas. Yes. I think I'm starting to love you too, and it terrifies me. Good, he said, pulling her closer. Be terrified with me. He kissed her, then there on the open road with the mountains as witness. It wasn't their first kiss that had been fumbling and uncertain. This was a promise, a declaration, a beginning. She tasted like tears and possibility, like home and adventure all at once. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Selena touched his face gently. Ask me again in a month, she said. If you still want to, if we still... Ask me again. I'll ask you every day if you want. Once a month will suffice, she said with a watery smile. They drove the rest of the way home in comfortable silence, her hand in his, both of them aware that something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't the arrangement they'd started with, wasn't the convenient fiction they'd agreed to. This was something else, something neither of them had expected, but both of them wanted. As they pulled up to the ranch, Tom came out of the barn, took one look at them, and grinned. About time, was all he said. The month that followed was like watching spring come to the mountains, slow at first, almost imperceptible. Then suddenly, everything was blooming at once. Jonas found himself looking for excuses to come back to the house during the day, just to catch a glimpse of Selena working in the kitchen garden she'd started, or to hear her singing while she hung laundry on the line. The hands had taken to timing their work so they'd be near the house around lunch, hoping for one of her sandwiches and a kind word. But underneath the growing warmth between them, trouble was brewing like storm clouds on the horizon. Anderson's harassment had escalated from cut fences to missing cattle, from veiled threats to outright intimidation. And then 3 weeks after that Sunday proposal on the road, everything came to a head. Jonas was in the barn working on a broken bridle when Danny came running, his young face flushed with exertion and fear. Boss, you need to come quick. There's a man at the house, fancy-dressed fellow from back east. He's asking Miss Selena to come with him, and she's gone white as a sheet. Jonas dropped the bridle and ran his boots pounding across the yard. He could hear voices before he reached the porch, a man's cultured tones and Selena's carefully controlled replies. The stranger stood in their parlor like he owned it, dressed in a black suit that probably cost more than most cowboys made in a year. He was handsome in that polished way Eastern men often were, with dark hair slicked back and a mustache waxed to points. But his eyes were cold as winter creek water, and the way he looked at Selena made Jonas's hands curl into fists. Ah, the man said, noticing Jonas. You must be the unfortunate Mr. Callahan. I'm Clayton Morrison, Selena's cousin. I've come to take her home where she belongs. I am home, Selena said quietly, but Jonas could see her trembling. Don't be ridiculous, dear cousin. This... Clayton gestured dismissively at the room. This is hardly suitable for a woman of your background. I've come to offer you protection, a proper home back in Philadelphia. The home you stole from her, Jonas asked, moving to stand beside Selina. Clayton's eyes narrowed. I see my cousin has been telling tales. How disappointing, Selina. I thought we were family. Family doesn't murder each other. Selina said, her voice stronger now with Jonas beside her. Such ugly accusations, and without proof, merely the ravings of a grief-stricken girl. Clayton pulled out a document from his jacket. I have here a warrant for your arrest, cousin. It seems certain valuable items went missing from the Whitmore household when you fled. They're pressing charges. That's a lie, Selina gasped. I took nothing but what was mine. The Whitmores say otherwise, and their word carries considerable weight in Philadelphia. Clayton smiled cold and satisfied. Of course I could convince them to drop the charges, if you come with me willingly. Jonas took the document, examined it. It looked official enough, but something felt wrong. This warrant has no judge's signature, no official seal. Details that can be added later, I assure you. Or never existed at all. Jonas crumpled the paper, tossed it into the fireplace. Get out of my house! Clayton's facade of civility cracked. You have no idea who you're dealing with, Callahan. I have resources connections. I can make your life very difficult. You're welcome to try. Jonas's hand moved to the gun on his hip, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed. But right now you're trespassing, and in Colorado we have particular ways of dealing with trespassers. This isn't over, Clayton said, but he was already backing toward the door. Selina knows what I'm capable of. Don't you, cousin? You saw what happened to James when he defied me. Selina made a sound like a wounded animal, and Jonas stepped forward, forcing Clayton back another step. If you come near her again, if you so much as send a letter, I'll kill you myself. And out here, Morrison, your Eastern connections mean nothing. Out here, justice is simpler and a lot more final. Clayton left, but his presence lingered like smoke from a snuffed candle. Selina sank into a chair, her face pale, her hands shaking. He found me, she whispered. I don't know how, but he found me. Jonas knelt beside her chair, took her cold hands in his. He can't touch you here. You don't know him, Jonas. He's like a snake patient calculating. He waited 2 years after James died to make his move, 2 years of playing the grieving cousin while he gathered power influence. She stood abruptly. I need to show you something. She led him upstairs to her room, pulled a small sewing box from beneath the bed. Inside, hidden beneath spools of thread and packets of needles, was an oilcloth bundle. These are the documents I mentioned, she said, unwrapping them carefully. My grandfather's real will leaving everything to James and me. Letters in Clayton's hand discussing his plans to forge a new one. A witness statement from my grandfather's lawyer who disappeared shortly after. It's enough to destroy Clayton, but only if I can get them to the right authorities. Jonas studied the papers. They were damning, certainly, but also dangerous. Why haven't you taken these to the law? Clayton owns the law in Philadelphia, at least the parts that matter. I tried once, went to a judge I thought was honest. Clayton found out. The next day that judge's house burned down with his family inside. It was ruled an accident, but I knew better. My God, Selina. Now you understand why I ran. Why I answered your mother's advertisement. I thought if I disappeared far enough, became someone else's wife, he'd let me go. But Clayton never lets go of anything he considers his. Jonas stood pacing to the window. Outside, life on the ranch continued, Tom directing the hands' horses grazing in the pasture, the normal rhythm of a day. But inside this room, the walls felt like they were closing in. We need Sheriff Bradley, he said finally. The sheriff can't protect me from Clayton. You heard him, he has resources. Then we make our own resources. Jonas turned to her decision, crystallizing in his mind. We're getting married. Tomorrow. Jonas, no. I won't have you tied to my troubles. I'm already tied to them. The moment you stepped off that train, your troubles became mine. But as your husband, I have legal standing Clayton doesn't. As your husband, I can protect you in ways I can't now. This isn't how it's supposed to happen. Not out of fear, not because... He crossed to her in 2 strides, pulled her into his arms. I'm not asking out of fear. I'm asking because I love you. Because this last month has shown me what life could be with you in it. Because every morning I wake up listening for your voice, and every night I fall asleep wishing you were beside me. Jonas, I told you I'd ask again in a month. It's only been 3 weeks, but I'm asking now. Marry me, Selena, not because of Clayton, not because of Anderson, but because I can't imagine my life without you in it anymore. She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. You impossible, wonderful man. Yes, yes, I'll marry you. He kissed her then, deep and desperate, pouring all his fear and love and determination into it. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. Tomorrow, he said. We'll ride to town at dawn, wake up Reverend Mills if we have to. The ladies will be scandalized. No proper engagement period. No church wedding. Let them be scandalized. I want you as my wife before Clayton has time to regroup. A knock at the door interrupted them. Tom's voice carried up the stairs, urgent and worried. Boss, we got company. Anderson and about 10 of his men riding in armed. Jonas cursed, as if this day wasn't complicated enough. He looked at Selena. Stay here. Lock the door behind me. Jonas, be careful. Always am. But as he walked downstairs checking his revolver, he knew careful might not be enough. Not with Clayton's threats hanging over them and Anderson choosing this moment to make his move. Anderson sat his horse in the front yard like he was posing for a portrait his men spread out behind him in a show of force. The Triple C hands had responded, forming their own line rifles visible but not yet raised. The air crackled with tension thick enough to cut. Anderson, Jonas said, stepping onto the porch. This is private property. I'm here on business, Callahan. Anderson's smile was predatory. I've just had an interesting conversation with a Mr. Morrison from Philadelphia. He tells me you're harboring a fugitive. Jonas's jaw tightened. Of course, Clayton would have found an ally in Anderson, two snakes recognizing each other. Miss Carter is my fiancée and a guest in my home. She's no fugitive. Morrison has papers that say otherwise. As a concerned citizen, I felt it was my duty to investigate. Anderson's eyes glittered with malice. Of course, this could all go away if you were willing to be reasonable about those water rights we discussed. So that's your game. Use Clayton's lies to blackmail me into giving you my water. Blackmail is such an ugly word. I prefer negotiation. Tom stepped up beside Jonas, rifle in hand. I prefer you get the hell off our land. Anderson's men shifted hands, moving to weapons. The Triple C boys responded in kind. The moment balanced on a knife's edge, ready to explode into violence. Then Selena's voice rang out clear and strong. Mr. Anderson, I believe you've been misled. She stood in the doorway, having ignored Jonas's order to stay upstairs. But she wasn't the frightened woman who'd faced Clayton earlier. She stood tall, regal, even every inch the lady, despite her simple dress. Miss Carter. Anderson tipped his hat mockingly, or should I say, Miss Morrison. My name is Selena Carter, and very soon it will be Selena Callahan. She descended the porch steps with deliberate grace. Mr. Morrison is indeed my cousin, but he's also a murderer and a thief. I have documents proving his crimes, which I'll be happy to share with Sheriff Bradley. Documents can be forged. Indeed they can, which is why I also have this. She pulled out a telegram from her pocket. From Judge Theodore Brennan of the Federal Circuit Court in Denver. He's very interested in reviewing my case, especially the parts involving interstate fraud and murder. Jonas stared at her. When had she sent a telegram? How had she managed this without him knowing? Anderson's confidence wavered. You're bluffing. Am I? Would you care to stake your ranch on it, Mr. Anderson? Because that's what you're doing by involving yourself in Clayton's schemes. Federal judges take a dim view of conspiracy to obstruct justice. She's right, Anderson. Sheriff Bradley's voice made everyone turn. The sheriff rode in with 2 deputies, all of them armed. Had an interesting telegram myself this morning from Denver. Seems there's going to be an investigation into Mr. Morrison's activities. Anyone helping him might find themselves caught up in it. Anderson's face darkened. This isn't over, Callahan. Yes, Jonas said quietly. It is. You've pushed and threatened and schemed, but it ends now. Get off my land and stay off. Next time you or your men set foot on Triple C property, we won't wait for the sheriff. For a moment, violence still threatened. Then Anderson wheeled his horse around his men following. They rode out in a cloud of dust and wounded pride. Sheriff Bradley dismounted, touched his hat to Selina. Ma'am, I'll need to take your statement about Morrison and those documents you mentioned. Of course, Sheriff, but perhaps it could wait until tomorrow. Mr. Callahan and I have a wedding to prepare for. Bradley's weathered face cracked into a smile. About time, Jonas. Your mother would be pleased. After the sheriff left with promises to return the next day, Jonas found Selina in the kitchen calmly making dinner as if she hadn't just faced down two dangerous men in one afternoon. When did you contact the federal judge? He asked. The day after Clayton arrived. I sent Danny to town with the telegram while you were out with the herd. She glanced at him. I'm sorry I didn't tell you, but I needed to know I could still fight my own battles. You're incredible. I'm practical. I knew Clayton would find allies here, men like Anderson who operate outside the law, so I found my own ally, one with more power than Clayton expected. Jonas crossed to her, pulled her into his arms. Remind me never to get on your bad side. Just don't murder my brother or steal my inheritance, and we should be fine. The words were light, but he could feel her trembling. It's going to be all right, he murmured into her hair. Is it Clayton won't give up easily? And Anderson will think twice before crossing us again. You saw his face when you mentioned federal investigation. He's a bully and a thief, but he's not stupid. She pulled back to look at him. Are you sure you want to marry me? My troubles seem to be multiplying rather than diminishing. Your troubles are my troubles. That's what marriage means. He cupped her face gently. Besides, you saved my ranch today. Anderson was ready to escalate to violence until you intervened. You protected what's mine as fiercely as I'll protect what's mine. What's yours? She raised an eyebrow. You, he said simply. You're mine, Selina. Have been since you stepped off that train, whether either of us knew it or not. The next morning dawned clear and cold frost silvering the grass like nature's wedding decoration. Jonas put on his best suit, the one he'd worn to his parents' funerals, but today it didn't feel like mourning clothes. Today it felt like armor, like a declaration. Selina appeared at the top of the stairs, and his breath caught. She wore a dress he'd never seen before, pale blue like winter sky with tiny pearl buttons and lace at the collar. Her dark hair was arranged in elaborate curls, a few white flowers from the late blooming roses by the porch woven through. Where did you get the dress? He asked, voice rough with emotion. I made it, she said, descending slowly. I've been working on it in the evenings. A woman should have something special for her wedding day, even if it's a rushed affair. You're beautiful. You're biased. Completely, he agreed, offering her his arm. The entire ranch turned out for the occasion. Tom had polished the wagon and decorated it with ribbons he'd somehow procured. The hands stood in a line, cleaned up, and grinning, each one offering congratulations and promises to defend their new lady with their lives if needed. Bit dramatic, boys, Selina said, but she was smiling, tears in her eyes. Not dramatic enough, Pete replied. You saved us from Tom's cooking, ma'am. We owe you everything. The ride to town felt both eternal and far too quick. Jonas was aware of every breath Selina took, every shift of her body beside him, the way her hand rested on his arm like it belonged there. Are you nervous? He asked. Terrified, she admitted. But the good kind of terrified, the kind that comes before something wonderful. Or something disastrous. Jonas Callahan is that any way to talk on our wedding day. Just being realistic. Realism is overrated. Today I choose hope. They arrived at the church to find it surprisingly full. Word had spread, as it always did in small towns, and half of Iron Ridge had turned out to witness the rushed wedding of Jonas Callahan and his mail-order bride. Reverend Mills met them at the door, his usual stern demeanor softened by genuine pleasure. I wondered when you two would stop dancing around each other. We weren't dancing, Jonas protested. Son, I've been marrying folks for 30 years. I know dancing when I see it. He looked at Selina. You sure about this young lady Jonas here can be mighty stubborn? I'm counting on it, Reverend. A woman needs a man who won't give up when things get difficult. And things will get difficult, Mills warned. Marriage always is. We've already faced murderous cousins and thieving neighbors, Selina said. How much worse could it get? Don't tempt fate, my dear. But Mills was smiling as he led them to the altar. The ceremony was simple, the words ancient and powerful. Jonas found himself lost in Selena's eyes as they spoke their vows, the rest of the world fading away. When Mills pronounced them husband and wife, when Jonas kissed his bride, the church erupted in applause. But the celebration was short-lived. As they exited the church, Clayton stood across the street watching. He touched his hat mockingly, then climbed into a hired carriage and drove away. The threat was clear, this wasn't over. "Let him watch," Jonas said, pulling Selena closer. "Let him see that you're protected now that you're not alone." The reception was held at the ranch, a hasty affair put together by the hands with surprising skill. Tom had slaughtered a steer. Miguel had somehow produced a guitar, and Danny had strung lanterns around the yard that made everything glow golden in the approaching dusk. Sheriff Bradley attended, bringing news that made everyone breathe easier. Morrison left on the afternoon train, bought a ticket to Denver, probably heading back east after that. "The federal judge wants to see those documents, Mrs. Callahan. This could be bigger than just your inheritance. There's talk of other victims, other schemes." "I'll bring them tomorrow," Selena promised. "No rush. Enjoy your wedding night." Bradley winked, making Selena blush and Jonas scowl. As the evening progressed, Jonas watched his wife move through their guests with natural grace. She danced with each of the hands, making them feel important, valued. She charmed the town ladies who'd been prepared to disapprove. She even managed a civil conversation with Mrs. Patterson, who'd been the most vocal critic of their arrangement. "She's something special," Tom said, appearing at Jonas's elbow with 2 glasses of whiskey. "Yes, she is. Your mother would have loved her." "She did love her. Chose her, didn't she? Somehow knew Selena was what I needed before I knew it myself. Mary Callahan was always too smart for the rest of us." Tom raised his glass. "To your mother, who knew best even from beyond." "To Ma," Jonas agreed, clinking glasses. Later, much later. After the guests had gone and the hands had stumbled back to the bunkhouse, Jonas and Selena stood alone in their kitchen now, not just his. "So, Mrs. Callahan," he said, pulling her close, "any regrets?" "Only one." His heart stuttered. "What? I wish we'd done this sooner." She stood on her tiptoes, kissed him softly. "I love you, Jonas. I think I have since that first day when you didn't send me away, even though you wanted to." "I didn't want to. That's what scared me. The moment I saw you saw that tear, I knew my life was about to change. I just didn't know how much." "Are you disappointed you could have had a simpler wife, one without murderous cousins and complicated pasts?" "I don't want simple. I want you." He swept her up into his arms, making her laugh. "Now, Mrs. Callahan, I believe there are certain traditions to observe." "Jonas," she protested, but she was smiling as he carried her up the stairs. Their wedding night was tender and passionate by turns, 2 people learning each other in the most intimate way. Jonas discovered that Selena had a scar on her shoulder from where she'd fought off young Whitmore, that she sighed his name like a prayer when he touched her just right, that she was brave in this as in everything else. Afterward, they lay entwined, watching moonlight paint patterns on the walls. Selena traced lazy circles on Jonas's chest, humming something soft and contented. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "Now we build a life together. Run the ranch, raise cattle, maybe raise children if we're blessed." "Children?" She repeated, wonder in her voice. "I never thought I'd have children. Do you want them?" "With you." "Yes, I want everything with you." A wolf howled in the distance, lonely and wild. But here in their bed in their home, Jonas felt nothing but complete. The woman who'd stepped off the train with tears on her face was now his wife, warm and real in his arms. "Tell me about the federal judge," he said. "How did you know to contact him?" "I didn't, not specifically, but I remembered something my grandfather's lawyer said before he disappeared, that federal law supersedes state law, that federal judges answer to different masters than local ones. So I took a chance, sent a telegram outlining Clayton's crimes, especially the interstate aspects. Judge Brennan responded within hours. "You're brilliant." "I'm desperate." "There's a difference." "Not anymore. You're not desperate anymore. You're home." She was quiet for so long he thought she'd fallen asleep. Then, "I never thought I'd have a home again." After James died, after I lost everything, I thought I'd spend my life moving from position to position, always temporary, always alone. Then your mother's letters came painting a picture of a place where someone could plant roots, could belong. And do you belong? She turned in his arms, looked at him with those gray eyes that had captured him from the first moment. I belong with you. Wherever you are, that's home. They made love again slower this time, savoring each touch, each whisper. Outside the ranch settled into sleep, but inside their room they were creating their own world, their own future. The next morning brought reality crashing back. Jonas woke to Tom pounding on the door, voice urgent. "Boss, we got trouble. The north pasture's on fire. Looks like Anderson's work." Jonas dressed quickly, kissing Selina before rushing out. The sky to the north glowed orange smoke rising in a black column. Half the hands were already mounted, ready to ride. "Stay here," he told Selina. "Keep the documents safe." "Jonas, be careful." "Always am." But as he rode toward the fire, Jonas knew careful wouldn't be enough. Anderson had escalated beyond threats and theft. This was war. They fought the fire all day, creating fire breaks, beating back flames with wet blankets, saving what cattle they could. By evening, 50 acres of prime grazing land was black ash, and they'd lost at least 20 head of cattle. "Could have been worse," Tom said, his face streaked with soot. "If the wind had shifted, could have taken the whole ranch." "Anderson wanted us to know he could destroy us if he chose to," Jonas replied grimly. "This was a warning. Some warning. This is arson, Jonas. We can have him arrested. With what proof you know he'll have an alibi, probably playing cards in town with witnesses." They rode back exhausted and demoralized. But as they crested the ridge above the ranch, Jonas saw something that made him sit up straighter. Lanterns blazed in every window of the house, and the yard was full of wagons. "What the hell?" Tom muttered. As they got closer, Jonas recognized the wagons, the Jennings family, the Patterson's Sheriff Bradley, even old Doc Sawyer. Half the town seemed to be at his ranch. Selina met them at the gate, her face smudged with flour, but smiling. The town saw the smoke. They came to help. "We brought food," Mrs. Jennings said, carrying a covered pot from her wagon. "Figured you boys would be hungry after fighting that fire." "Brought medical supplies, too," Doc Sawyer added, "in case there were injuries." "And we brought something else," Sheriff Bradley said, his expression grim but satisfied. "3 of Anderson's men caught red-handed with torches heading for your barn. They're sitting in jail right now, and one of them's already talking, says Anderson paid them to burn you out." Jonas felt something ease in his chest. "You arrested Anderson." "Not yet, but I will. With testimony from his own men, even Anderson's money won't keep him out of prison." Bradley paused. "Your wife sent young Danny to fetch me the moment she saw the smoke. Said she had a feeling Anderson wouldn't stop at the pasture. She was right." Jonas looked at Selina, this remarkable woman who'd become his wife just yesterday. She'd protected their home while he was gone, turned potential disaster into victory. "How did you know?" he asked her later after the neighbors had gone and the hands were fed and bedded down. "Clayton used fire once burned down a rival's warehouse. Men like him and Anderson, they think alike, using fear and destruction to get what they want. I just guessed Anderson might try the same pattern." "You saved our home." "Our home," she repeated, smiling. "I like the sound of that." "Get used to it, Mrs. Callahan. You're stuck with it now, stuck with me." "There's nowhere else I'd rather be." They stood together on the porch, looking out at their land scarred by fire, but not defeated, threatened, but not conquered. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Anderson's arrest would cause ripples, Clayton might return, the ranch would need rebuilding. But tonight they were together. The woman who'd arrived with nothing but tears and determination was now his wife, his partner, his love. The empty house that had echoed with loneliness was now filled with purpose and promise. The arrest of Anderson sent shockwaves through Iron Ridge that rippled out like stones thrown in still water. Within 3 days, his ranch was in chaos. His men scattered, and the man himself sat in the county jail awaiting trial. But Jonas knew better than to celebrate too early. Wounded snakes were the most dangerous, and Anderson still had friends, still had money, still had reach. It was early November when the first snow began to fall, delicate flakes that dusted the mountains like sugar on a cake. Selina stood at the kitchen window, one hand resting on her stomach, watching the white curtain descend. She hadn't told Jonas yet about the subtle changes in her body, the morning queasiness, the tender breasts, the missed monthly. She wanted to be sure, wanted to give him certainty rather than hope that might be dashed. "You're up early," Jonas said, coming up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. She leaned back against him, savoring his warmth. "The snow woke me." "It's different from Philadelphia snow cleaner, quieter." "Everything's different here." He pressed a kiss to her neck. Better, Vor," she agreed, turning in his arms. "Jonas, I need to go to town today." "In this weather, can it wait?" "I need to see Doc Sawyer." She kept her voice carefully neutral. "Just a checkup." Concern immediately creased his brow. "Are you ill?" "You have been looking tired lately." "I'm fine, just being cautious." She stood on her tiptoes, kissed him softly. "A woman needs to take care of herself out here." He studied her face, and she could see him wanting to probe further, but he simply nodded. "I'll drive you." "I can manage." "Not in this snow, not alone. Besides, I need to check in with Sheriff Bradley about the trial." They made the trip to town in comfortable silence, the snow muffling all sound except the creak of wagon wheels and the steady breathing of the horses. Selina found herself memorizing this moment, the weight of Jonas's shoulder against hers, the way snowflakes caught in his dark hair, the peaceful expression on his face that had been absent for so long before she came. Doc Sawyer's office was warm and cluttered, smelling of carbolic and pipe tobacco. The old physician examined her with gentle efficiency, his weathered face giving nothing away until the end. "Well, Mrs. Callahan," he said, washing his hands in the basin, "I'd say you're about 2 months along. Baby should arrive sometime in June if my calculations are correct." The world seemed to tilt and steady itself again. "You're certain." "As certain as I can be. You're young, healthy, strong. I don't anticipate any problems, though you'll need to take care during the winter months. Ranch work can be demanding." "Jonas doesn't know yet." Doc Sawyer's eyes twinkled. "Then I suggest you tell him before he wears a groove in my floor with his pacing. He's been out there for 20 minutes, probably imagining all sorts of dire diagnoses." Selina found Jonas exactly as Doc Sawyer described, pacing the small waiting area like a caged wolf. When he saw her, relief flooded his face. "Well, are you all right?" "I'm perfect," she said, taking his hands. "We're perfect." "We're—" Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by joy, so pure it took her breath away. "Selina, are you? Are we—" "June," she said softly. "We're having a baby in June." He swept her up, spinning her around in the small space, laughing like she'd never heard him laugh before. When he set her down, there were tears in his eyes. "A baby," he breathed wonder in his voice. "Our baby. Our baby," she confirmed, touching his face. "Are you happy?" Happy doesn't begin to cover it. He kissed her deeply right there in Doc Sawyer's waiting room, not caring who might see. "We need to tell everyone. Tom will want to start building a cradle immediately. The hands will probably try to baby-proof the entire ranch." "Jonas," she laughed, "slow down. We have months to prepare." But his excitement was infectious, and by the time they reached the sheriff's office, Selina was already imagining nursery colors and tiny clothes. Sheriff Bradley's news, however, dampened their joy somewhat. "Anderson made bail," he said grimly. "Judge Thornton from Denver, old friend of his apparently. He's not supposed to leave town, but men like Anderson don't follow rules," Jonas finished. "Exactly. I've got a deputy watching him, but be careful. Desperate men do desperate things." The ride home was tenser. Jonas's hand never far from his rifle, his eyes scanning the tree line for threats. But they made it back without incident, and soon the entire ranch knew about the baby. The hands reacted exactly as Jonas had predicted. Tom immediately began sketching cradle designs. Miguel promised to teach the child Spanish lullabies, and Danny declared himself the future honorary uncle. "This baby's going to be spoiled rotten," Selina told Jonas that night as they lay in bed, his hand splayed protectively over her still flat stomach. "Good. Every child should be treasured." His voice carried an edge of something lost, perhaps, or longing. "Tell me," she said softly. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "My mother lost 3 babies before me, 2 after. I was the only one who survived past infancy. She called me her miracle, her answered prayer." Oh, Jonas. That's why she was so determined to see me married, to see the family continue. She knew how precious and precarious life could be. She would have loved knowing about this baby. "She does know," Jonas said with quiet certainty. "Somehow, somewhere she knows." The next weeks passed in a blur of preparation and vigilance. The ranch prospered. Despite the loss from the fire cattle, prices were up, and Jonas had negotiated a contract with the army that would secure their finances for years. Selena threw herself into preparing for winter and baby alike, preserving food, sewing tiny garments, turning the spare room next to theirs into a nursery. But underneath the domestic peace, tension simmered. Anderson was seen in town, always watching, always with that cold smile. His remaining men had been spotted near Triple C property lines, and then there were the letters, anonymous, threatening, slipped under doors and left in mailboxes. "Leave or lose everything," one said. "Your wife looks lovely in blue. Read another," making Jonas's blood run cold because Selena had worn blue just the day before in town. "He's trying to frighten us," Selena said, though her own hands trembled as she read the latest missive. "He's succeeding," Jonas admitted. "I can't protect you every moment." "You don't have to. I'm not some delicate flower, Jonas. I survived Clayton. I survived poverty and desperation. I can survive Anderson." But bravado couldn't stop the fear that crept in at night, when every creak of the house sounded like an intruder, when every shadow could hide a threat. It was Tom who came up with the solution. "We need to go on the offensive," he said one evening as they discussed security. "Anderson expects us to huddle here defending, but what if we investigated him instead?" "What do you mean?" Jonas asked. "I mean, a man like Anderson didn't get rich just from cattle. There are rumors, rustling operations, land fraud, even murder. What if we could prove some of it?" "That's dangerous territory, Tom." "So is waiting for him to make his move." Selena looked up from her sewing. "Tom's right. We need leverage, something to make Anderson back off permanently." "I won't risk you." "You're already risking me by doing nothing." She set aside her work, fixed him with those storm gray eyes. "Jonas, I need you to trust me. Trust that I can help, that I'm not just something to be protected." It was Selena who made the first breakthrough. Using her connections with the town ladies' relationships she'd carefully cultivated, despite their initial suspicion, she learned about Anderson's first wife, a woman who'd died under mysterious circumstances 15 years earlier. "She fell down the stairs," Mrs. Patterson whispered over tea, glancing around as if Anderson might materialize from the wallpaper. "But my sister was her friend, and she said Margaret was planning to leave him. Had her bags packed and everything." "What happened to the bags?" Selena asked casually. "Disappeared, along with the servant who was supposed to help her leave. Girl named Rosa, Mexican, no family here, never seen again." Selena shared this information with Jonas and Tom, who began their own investigation. They found records of land transfers that didn't make sense. Cattle sales with no corresponding reduction in Anderson's herds. Patterns of intimidation and acquisition that painted a picture of systematic criminal enterprise. But it was Danny Young, eager Danny, who found the smoking gun. "Boss," he said, bursting into the kitchen one snowy evening, "I found her, Rosa Valdez, the servant who disappeared." Everyone turned to stare at him. "Where?" Jonas demanded. "Living in Pueblo under a different name. My cousin knows her daughter. She's been hiding all these years, terrified Anderson would find her." Danny's face was flushed with excitement and fear. "She saw him push his wife down those stairs. She's willing to testify if we can protect her." The room erupted in discussion plans, forming and reforming. But through it all, Selena noticed something that made her blood run cold. A shadow moving past the kitchen window, too deliberate to be wind-blown branches. "Someone's outside," she said quietly. Instantly, the men were armed and moving. Jonas pushed Selena toward the stairs. "Go to our room, lock the door." "Jonas." "Please, Selena, for the baby." She went, but not to cower. She retrieved the rifle Jonas had taught her to shoot, positioned herself at the bedroom window with a clear view of the yard. Below, she could see Jonas and the hand spreading out searching. The moon was bright on the snow, turning everything silver and shadow. Then she saw him, a figure creeping toward the barn with what looked like a torch. Without thinking, Selena opened the window, aimed, and fired. The shot echoed across the valley, and the figure dropped his torch and ran. The men gave chase, but Selena kept her eyes on the barn, watching for more intruders. "Good shot," Jonas said later after they'd confirmed the would-be arsonist had escaped but left clear tracks in the snow. "You probably saved the barn." "I told you I wasn't helpless." "No," he agreed, pulling her close. "You're definitely not helpless. You're magnificent." The next morning brought unexpected visitors. A federal marshal named Wade arrived with 2 deputies sent by Judge Brennan in response to Sheriff Bradley's reports about Anderson. "Seems Mr. Anderson has been a person of interest in several federal cases," Marshal Wade explained, accepting coffee from Selena with a grateful nod. "Interstate cattle rustling, mail fraud, and now possibly murder. We're here to investigate thoroughly." "We have a witness," Jonas said, and explained about Rosa Valdez. Wade's eyes sharpened. "We'll need to bring her in, protect her. She can testify to murder." "Anderson will never see it coming," Tom finished with satisfaction. But Anderson had his own sources, his own plans. That night, as they prepared for bed, Selena felt the first cramping pain. She gasped, doubling over, and Jonas was instantly at her side. "What is it? What's wrong?" "The baby," she whispered, terror in her voice. "Something's wrong with the baby." Jonas carried her to bed, sent Danny riding hard for Doc Sawyer despite the worsening snow. The next hours were the longest of his life, watching Selena writhe in pain, seeing the fear in her eyes, unable to do anything but hold her hand and pray to a god he'd nearly forgotten. Doc Sawyer arrived near midnight, took one look at Selena, and went to work with grim efficiency. "She's bleeding," he told Jonas quietly. "Not heavily yet, but this is serious. Can you save them the baby?" "I'm going to try. But Jonas, you need to prepare yourself. Sometimes there's nothing we can do." Jonas felt his world tilting, threatening to shatter. He'd just found happiness, just started to believe in a future beyond mere survival. He couldn't lose them now. "Fight," he whispered to Selena, gripping her hand. "Fight for us, for our baby, please." Through the night, they battled Doc Sawyer, working with steady hands, while Jonas provided whatever comfort he could. Selena was magnificent, even in her pain, following Doc's instructions, breathing through the agony, never giving up. As dawn broke, painting, the snow-covered mountains rose, and gold the crisis passed. Selena's breathing eased, the bleeding stopped, and Doc Sawyer finally allowed himself a slight smile. "The baby's still there," he said, exhaustion clear in his voice. "Still fighting, but she needs complete bed rest for at least 2 weeks, maybe more. No stress, no exertion." "She'll have it," Jonas promised. "I mean it, Jonas. Another episode like this could kill them both." After Doc left, Jonas sat beside the bed watching Selena sleep. She looked so pale, so fragile. Nothing like the woman who'd stood up to Anderson, who'd shot at intruders, who'd changed his life with her strength. "I'm not giving up," she murmured, eyes still closed. "I know." "The baby's strong, like its father." "Like its mother," Jonas corrected. She opened her eyes, then looked at him with such love it nearly broke him. "We're going to be fine, Jonas, all 3 of us. I can feel it." But even as she spoke, they could hear horses approaching, many horses riding hard. Jonas moved to the window, cursed at what he saw. Anderson and 20 men, all armed, surrounding the house. "What does he want?" Selena asked, trying to sit up. "You stay down," Jonas ordered, checking his rifle. "No matter what happens, you stay in this bed." He went downstairs to find his men already positioned, weapons ready. Marshal Wade and his deputies had taken strategic positions. Badges visible, federal authority clear. "Anderson," Jonas called from the porch. "You're violating the terms of your bail." "I'm here to make you an offer, Callahan," Anderson replied, sitting his horse like a king on a throne. "One last chance to be reasonable." "I'm listening." "Sell me the CCC. I'll pay fair market value, even throw in extra for your trouble. You and your wife can start fresh somewhere else, somewhere safer. This is our home. It's your grave if you're not careful." Anderson's voice carried clear threat. Accidents happen on ranches. Fires start. Women in delicate conditions take falls. Babies are born early and weak. The threat to Selena and the baby made Jonas see red. He raised his rifle, aimed it directly at Anderson's heart. "Get off my land, now." "You're making a mistake, Callahan. I own this valley, the judge, the bank, half the town council. You think one federal marshal changes that?" "I think you're about to find out," Marshal Wade said, stepping into view. "Robert Anderson, you're under arrest for murder conspiracy in violation of federal interstate commerce laws." Anderson's face went white. "You can't prove anything." "Rosa Valdez says otherwise. She's in protective custody, ready to testify about how you pushed your wife down those stairs, how you threatened to kill her if she talked." For a moment, violence trembled in the air. Anderson's men shifted hands on weapons, waiting for their boss's order. Jonas held his breath, finger on the trigger, ready to defend his home, his wife, his child. Then Anderson laughed, cold and bitter. "You think you've won? You have no idea what you've started. I have friends, Callahan, powerful friends who won't let this stand." "Your friends are welcome to visit you in federal prison," Wade replied calmly. "Now you can come quietly, or we can do this the hard way. Your choice." Anderson looked around at his men, at the federal badges, at the rifles pointed his way. His shoulders slumped in defeat. "Stand down, boys. No point dying for a lost cause." As the marshals took Anderson into custody, Jonas heard a sound from upstairs. Selena calling his name, voice tight with pain. He ran. Taking the stairs 3 at a time, burst into their room to find her clutching her stomach, tears streaming down her face. "It's happening again," she gasped. "The pain." Doc Sawyer was sent for again, but this time Jonas also sent for Mrs. Jennings, who delivered half the babies in the valley. Together they worked through another long day, fighting for the life of the child who represented everything Jonas and Selena had built together. "Sometimes," Mrs. Jennings said quietly as she wiped Selena's fevered brow, "babies come when there's too much stress, too much fear. The mother's body thinks it's protecting the child by releasing it early." "Anderson," Jonas said bitterly, "his threats are over now," Mrs. Jennings said firmly. "That man will never threaten anyone again. Now Selena needs to know she's safe, truly safe. That's the best medicine we can give her." Jonas knelt beside the bed, took Selena's hand. "He's gone, love. Anderson's been arrested. He'll never hurt us again. You can rest now, truly rest. You and our baby are safe." Selena's eyes focused on his face, searching for truth. "Promise?" "I swear it. On my mother's grave, on our love, on everything I hold sacred. You're safe." Something eased in her face, tension flowing out like water. Her breathing steadied, the pain seemed to lessen. By evening, Doc Sawyer was cautiously optimistic. "She needs rest, weeks of it. But I think the worst has passed. The baby's still fighting, still holding on." "Takes after its parents," Tom said from the doorway, where he and the hands had gathered, worry clear on all their faces. "How's Our Lady?" Pete asked anxiously. "She's going to be fine," Jonas said, and for the first time truly believed it. The next weeks were quiet ones. Anderson was transferred to federal custody in Denver, his empire crumbling as former associates rushed to make deals with prosecutors. Several of his men were arrested for various crimes. The Rocking A Ranch was put up for sale to pay legal fees and restitution. Selena spent those weeks in bed reading, sewing tiny garments, and holding court as the ranch wives visited in shifts, bringing food and gossip and comfort. The house had never been so full of laughter, of women's voices, of the gentle business of community. "I never had this before," Selena told Jonas one evening as he sat beside her reading aloud from a book of poetry she loved. "Female friends, women who care whether I live or die." "You've given them something too," Jonas pointed out. "You've shown them what courage looks like, what it means to stand firm against bullies and threats." Christmas came with pristine snow, and the kind of cold that made the windows frost in beautiful patterns. Jonas had the hands bring a tree into the house, the first since his mother died. Selena directed the decoration from her bed, laughing as Danny and Miguel argued about the placement of ornaments. On Christmas morning, Jonas gave her a gold locket with their initials engraved inside. She gave him something even more precious, Doc Sawyer's assurance that the baby was thriving, that the danger had passed, that come June they would indeed welcome their child. "Best Christmas gift ever," Jonas said, kissing her gently. "Just wait until June," she replied, hand on her now visible bump. January brought news from Philadelphia. Clayton Morrison had been arrested on federal charges, the documents Selina had provided proving crucial. Her inheritance was restored, a considerable sum that shocked Jonas when she showed him the telegram. "You're wealthy," he said, stunned. "We're wealthy," she corrected. "What's mine is yours, remember. Besides, I have plans for this money." "What kind of plans?" "The kind that involves building a school in Iron Ridge, a real school with a proper teacher. The kind that involves helping other women like me, women who need a second chance." Jonas looked at his wife, brilliant, brave, beautiful, and wondered again how he'd gotten so lucky. "Have I told you today that I love you?" "Only 3 times. You're slipping, Mr. Callahan." He was about to make it 4 when Tom knocked on the door. "Boss, we got a visitor. Says he's a lawyer from Denver, has papers for Mrs. Callahan." The lawyer was a thin, nervous man who kept adjusting his spectacles. "Mrs. Callahan, I represent the estate of Clayton Morrison." Selina's hand found Jonas's. "Clayton's dead. Murdered in his cell 3 days ago. It seems he had made enemies beyond just yourself. However, as his only living relative, you inherit his estate as well." The irony of it was staggering. Clayton, who had killed for inheritance, who had pursued Selina across the country for money, had ended up leaving everything to her anyway. "I don't want it," Selina said immediately. "My dear woman, we're talking about a considerable fortune. Blood money, I won't touch it." "Then donate it," Jonas suggested. "Use it for good for everything Clayton would have hated." Selina's eyes lit up. "A foundation for women escaping violent situations. Safe houses, job training, new starts." She looked at the lawyer. "Can you arrange that?" Yes, of course, but are you certain this is millions of dollars?" "I'm certain. Draw up the papers." After the lawyer left, shaking his head at the fortune being given away, Jonas pulled Selina close. "You continue to amaze me." "I learned something these past months," she said, settling against him. "Money isn't security. This is security. You, our baby, this ranch, this community. Everything else is just numbers on paper." February brought the sale of the Rocking A, bought by a collective of smaller ranchers led by Tom, who'd saved every penny for 20 years for such an opportunity. Jonas co-signed the loan, guaranteeing his foreman would finally have his own land. "You didn't have to do that," Tom said, voice rough with emotion. "Your family," Jonas replied simply. Family helps family. March saw Selina finally able to leave her bed, though Jonas watched her like a hawk ready to carry her at the first sign of fatigue. She laughed at his hovering, but secretly loved it. Loved being cherished, protected, valued. The ranch prospered as winter gave way to spring. The Army contract proved lucrative. The cattle were healthy, and with Anderson gone, peace settled over the valley like a benediction. The hands worked with new enthusiasm, knowing their lady was well, their future secure. April brought wildflowers and the arrival of Iron Ridge's first official schoolteacher hired with Selina's Philadelphia money. Miss Harper was young, enthusiastic, and grateful for the opportunity. The schoolhouse was built in record time, every family contributing labor or materials. "You did this," Jonas told Selina as they watched the children arrive for the first day of school, faces bright with excitement. "We did this," she corrected. "None of it would have been possible without you believing in me, supporting me." May was spent in final preparation for the baby. The nursery was painted soft yellow, the color of hope. A beautiful cradle sat ready, carved by Tom with such care it was a work of art. The ranch wives had quilted blankets, sewn gowns, knitted booties until the baby would want for nothing. It was on a perfect June morning, with birds singing and the air sweet with the scent of roses, that Selina's labor began. Jonas, who'd faced down gunmen and wild animals without flinching, found himself terrified. "Breathe," Selina told him, amused despite her pain. "You look ready to faint." "I'm fine," he lied. Then promptly sat down when his knees wobbled. Doc Sawyer and Mrs. Jennings took charge, banishing Jonas to the hallway, where he paced with Tom in the hands, all of them nervous as expectant fathers themselves. "You'd think we were all having babies," Miguel muttered, mopping sweat from his brow despite the cool morning. "In a way we are," Pete replied. "This baby belongs to all of us, to the whole Triple C." Hours passed, marked by Selena's cries and Jonas's desperate prayers. Then, as the sun reached its zenith, a different cry filled the air, high, indignant, perfectly healthy. "Jonas," Mrs. Jennings called, "come meet your son. A son." Jonas entered the room on shaking legs, saw Selena propped against pillows, exhausted but radiant, holding a wrapped bundle. "He's perfect," she whispered, pulling back the blanket to reveal a red, wrinkled face topped with dark hair. "Absolutely perfect." Jonas touched his son's cheek with one trembling finger, felt the impossible softness of new skin. The baby's eyes opened gray like his mother's and seemed to look right at him. "Hello, little one," Jonas whispered, and felt his heart crack open, expanding to make room for this overwhelming love. "What should we name him?" Selena asked. "James," Jonas said without hesitation, "for your brother, and Thomas for mine, the brother who would have been." "James Thomas Callahan, Yub," Selena said, testing the name. "It's perfect." They brought little James out to meet his honorary uncles, 8 rough cowboys who turned into sentimental fools at the sight of the tiny baby. Danny actually cried, though he blamed it on dust. Miguel sang a soft Spanish lullaby that made the baby settle peacefully. Tom stood silent, overwhelmed by the honor of the baby carrying his name. "He'll be spoiled worse than a prize bull," Pete predicted, and everyone laughed. That evening, as Selena slept with the baby in the cradle beside their bed, Jonas stood at the window looking out over his land, their land. The woman who'd stepped off the train with tears on her face had become his wife, his partner, the mother of his child. She'd brought love back to a house that had forgotten its sound, had turned a collection of buildings into a home. The summer that followed James's birth was one of those golden seasons that lived forever in memory each day, seeming to stretch like honey in the sun. Jonas would wake to find Selena nursing their son by the window, morning light creating a halo around them both, and think his heart might burst from the fullness of it all. The ranch thrived under their joint management. Selena had proven to have a sharp mind for business, catching discrepancies in the books that Jonas had missed, negotiating better prices with suppliers through sheer charm and intelligence. It was during the height of summer, when James was barely 2 months old, that the letter arrived, which would change everything once again. Danny brought it from town, his face troubled as he handed it to Selena. "Came by special messenger," he said. "Fellow said it was urgent from Washington." Selena's hands trembled slightly as she opened it, Jonas reading over her shoulder, while she cradled James against her chest. The letterhead was Official Department of Federal Justice, and the contents made them both go still. "They want me to testify," Selena said quietly, "in Washington, about Clayton's operations, his connections to a larger crime syndicate they've uncovered." Jonas felt the old fear creeping back, the protective instinct that made him want to bundle his family away from any threat. "You don't have to go." "Yes, I do." She looked up at him, those gray eyes steady despite the fear he could see lurking in their depths. "If I don't, other women will suffer what I suffered. Other families will be destroyed like mine was." "Selena, you have a baby to think about now." "I'm thinking about him, about the world he'll grow up in. Do I want him to live in a place where men like Clayton can operate with impunity, where crime syndicates can destroy lives without consequence?" She shifted James in her arms, looking down at his sleeping face. "I need to do this, Jonas. For him, for us, for everyone who can't fight back." The argument that followed was their first real fight as a married couple. Jonas wanted her safe, protected, far from any danger. Selena wanted just disclosure, the knowledge that she'd stood up to evil and won. They went to bed that night with tension still crackling between them, baby James seeming to sense the discord and fussing more than usual. It was Mrs. Jennings who provided the solution the next morning, arriving with fresh bread and practical wisdom. "You're both right," she said bluntly, settling her ample frame at their kitchen table. "Selena needs to testify and Jonas needs to protect his family, so you do both. You all go to Washington together." "All of us," Jonas asked, surprised. Why not take Tom to run things here, take the baby so Selena doesn't have to be separated from him? Make it an opportunity instead of a trial. She looked between them shrewdly. When was the last time either of you left this valley? Might do you good to see there's a world beyond these mountains. The idea took root slowly, but within a week plans were in motion. Tom would indeed manage the ranch with Pete as his second. Miguel's wife, who'd recently arrived from Mexico, would help with James during the journey. They would take the train stay in a good hotel, make it as safe and comfortable as possible. It's still dangerous, Jonas warned as they packed. Life is dangerous, Selena replied, folding tiny baby clothes with precise care. But hiding from it isn't living. The journey east was a revelation for Jonas, who'd never been farther than Denver. The landscape changed from mountains to plains to forests, each mile taking them further from everything familiar. James proved to be an excellent traveler, sleeping through most of the train's motion wide-eyed and curious when awake. He's going to be an adventurer, Selena predicted, watching their son stare fascinated at the world rushing past the window. Like his mother, Jonas said, meaning it as a compliment. Washington was overwhelming, a city of broad avenues and important buildings, men in dark suits hurrying past with serious faces, women in fashions that made Selena's simple dresses seem quaint. They stayed at the Willard Hotel, a luxury Jonas insisted on despite the cost. If we're doing this, we're doing it right, he said, watching Selena's eyes widen at their suite's elegance. The trial was set for 3 days, hence giving them time to meet with the prosecutors, review testimony, prepare for what was coming. The lead prosecutor, a man named Harrison with sharp eyes and a sharper mind, was impressed with Selena's recall and composure. "You're our key witness," he told her. "Your testimony, combined with the documents you preserved, will put away not just Clayton's associates, but an entire network of corruption stretching from Philadelphia to San Francisco." "No pressure," Selena said dryly, making Harrison laugh. The night before the trial, Jonas couldn't sleep. He stood at the window of their hotel room watching gaslight flicker on the streets below when Selena joined him, James sleeping in her arms. "You're worried," she said. "Terrified," he corrected. "What if they come after you? What if revealing all this puts a target on your back? Then we face it together, like we've faced everything else." She leaned against him, warm and solid and real. "Jonas, I spent years running hiding, making myself small to avoid notice. I won't do that anymore. I won't teach our son that evil should go unchallenged because fighting it might be dangerous." The courthouse the next morning was packed, journalists and curious citizens filling every available seat. Selena took the stand wearing her best dress, the blue one from their wedding, her chin high, her voice clear. She told the story from the beginning: her grandfather's death, James's murder, Clayton's persecution, her flight west. She presented the documents, explained their significance, identified associates from photographs. The defense attorney tried to paint her as a bitter woman seeking revenge, a fallen woman of questionable morals who'd married a stranger for money. Selena weathered each attack with dignity, her answers precise and devastating. "Yes, I married Jonas Callahan shortly after arriving in Colorado," she said calmly. "I married him because he showed me kindness when the world had shown me cruelty. I married him because he saw me as a person worthy of respect, not a possession to be claimed or discarded. If that makes me fallen in your eyes, sir, then I'll gladly fall 1,000 times more." The gallery erupted in whispers and some applause before the judge called for order. Jonas, sitting in the front row with James, felt pride swell in his chest until he thought his ribs might crack. The cross-examination continued for hours, but Selena never wavered, never contradicted herself, never lost her composure. When it was finally over, she stepped down from the stand and walked straight to Jonas, taking James from his arms and holding their son like armor against the world's judgment. "You were magnificent," Jonas whispered. "I was terrified," she whispered back, and he could feel her trembling now that it was over. The verdict came 2 days later, guilty on all counts. The crime syndicate Clayton had been part of crumbled like a house of cards, its members scrambling to make deals turn evidence save themselves. The prosecutor shook Selena's hand afterward, thanking her for her courage. "Justice doesn't happen without people like you," Harrison said. people willing to stand up despite the cost. They stayed in Washington another week, partly to ensure there was no immediate retaliation, partly to let Selina recover from the emotional toll of the trial. Jonas took her to see the monuments, the Capitol building, the Smithsonian. They had their photograph taken on the National Mall, James in Selina's arms, Jonas standing protective and proud beside them. "We should send this to the ranch," Selina said, studying the photograph. "So the boys know we're thinking of them." The journey home was different from the journey out. They were the same people, but changed, somehow expanded by experience. Selina had faced her past and triumphed. Jonas had seen a wider world and found it didn't diminish his love for their valley. James had taken his first steps toward becoming the well-traveled, confident child he would become. Tom met them at the station with troubling news. "We've had visitors while you were gone. Federal men asking questions about the ranch, about our contracts." "What kind of questions?" Jonas asked, immediately on alert. "About whether we're hiding anything, whether our success is legitimate. Someone's been spreading rumors saying we must be corrupt to have prospered so quickly after Anderson's fall." Jonas cursed. Even from prison, even defeated, their enemies could still strike at them. But Selina merely smiled a sharp expression that Jonas had learned meant someone was about to regret crossing her. "Let them investigate," she said. "Our books are clean, our contracts legitimate. In fact, invite them to stay to examine everything. Complete transparency." "Selina, that could take weeks." "Then it takes weeks. Jonas, we have nothing to hide. Let them look until they're satisfied. Kill the rumors with openness." It was a brilliant strategy. The federal investigators, expecting resistance, were instead welcomed with open arms. Selina herself walked them through the books, explained every transaction, introduced them to every business partner. She served them her famous pie and regaled them with stories of ranch life until they were charmed despite themselves. "Ma'am," the lead investigator said after a week of scrutiny, "I've rarely seen books this clean or business practices this ethical. Whoever started these rumors was badly mistaken." "Or deliberately lying," Selina suggested gently. "That too. We'll be filing a report that should put any questions to rest permanently." After they left, Jonas found Selina in the nursery rocking James and humming softly. "You knew they'd find nothing." "Of course, but more importantly now everyone knows they'd find nothing. We're above suspicion now, untouchable in a way we weren't before." She looked up at him. "Clayton taught me that reputation is everything. Ours is now sterling." Fall arrived with its burst of color, the aspens turning gold like coins scattered across the mountains. The ranch prepared for winter, laying in supplies, reinforcing buildings, gathering the herds closer. It was during this busy season that unexpected visitors arrived, a wagon train of 3 families, Eastern Europeans by their dress and accent, looking lost and desperate. "Please," the apparent leader said in broken English. "We look for work, for place to stay. We have children." Jonas's first instinct was to send them on their way. The ranch didn't need more workers, and winter was coming. But Selina stepped forward, James on her hip, and began speaking in what sounded like German. The man's face lit up with relief, and a rapid conversation ensued. "They're refugees, but," Selina explained to Jonas, "fleeing persecution in their homeland. They're farmers, hard workers. They've spent everything to get here and have nowhere to go." "Selina, we can't take in every stray. We can take in these." Her gray eyes were fierce. "Jonas, they have children. It's almost winter. If we send them away—" She didn't have to finish. Jonas looked at the families, tired, frightened, but with that same desperate dignity he'd seen in Selina when she'd stepped off the train. "The old Watson place is still empty. Roof needs work, but it's shelter." Selina translated, and the relief on the families' faces was painful to see. Within a day, the entire ranch had mobilized to help. The hands repaired the roof, the women shared food and blankets, and the children, language barriers forgotten, played together in the yard. "You're too soft-hearted," Jonas told Selina that night, but his tone was affectionate. "I'm exactly soft-hearted enough," she replied. "Those families will work hard, contribute to the community. In a year, they'll be established. In 10 years, their children will be Americans. Isn't that what this country is supposed to be about?" She was right as usual. The families proved to be excellent workers, innovative farmers who introduced new techniques that improved crop yields. Their children attended the school Selena had helped establish quick learners who enriched the classroom with their different perspectives. Winter came early and hard that year, snow falling in thick curtains that isolated the ranch for days at a time. But inside the house, warmth prevailed. James was crawling now, exploring everything with determined curiosity. The evenings were filled with stories and songs, Jonas reading aloud, while Selena sewed the baby playing at their feet. It was during one such evening, the snow falling steadily outside, that Tom arrived with urgent news. Letter from the federal prosecutor. They found something in Clayton's papers. Selena tensed. What kind of something? Information about your father, ma'am. Seems he didn't die in the war like you were told. The room went very still. Selena's face had gone pale, her hands frozen on her sewing. What? Tom handed over the letter, which Jonas read aloud. According to documents found in Clayton's safe, Selena's father had survived the war but been imprisoned by Clayton's father on false charges, dying in captivity years later. Clayton had known all along, had kept the information as potential leverage. My father was alive, Selena whispered. All those years I mourned him, he was alive. Selena. Jonas reached for her, but she stood abruptly, pacing to the window. He died, thinking I'd forgotten him, thinking his daughter had abandoned him. Tears streamed down her face. How many more secrets? How many more lies? It wasn't your fault, Jonas said firmly. You were a child. You couldn't have known. But Clayton knew. His father knew. They kept us apart deliberately, cruelly. She turned to face them, and Jonas saw something shift in her expression. Sadness transforming into determination. I want to know everything. Every secret Clayton kept, every life he destroyed. I want it all brought to light. The investigation that followed revealed a pattern of cruelty spanning generations. Clayton's family had built their fortune on the suffering of others using blackmail, false imprisonment, and worse to maintain power. But each revelation, painful as it was, also brought liberation. Other victims came forward emboldened by Selena's courage. A fund was established for restitution using Clayton's seized assets. Spring arrived with its promise of renewal, and with it came another letter, this one bringing joy instead of pain. The school Selena had established had been so successful that the state wanted to use it as a model for rural education. They were sending representatives to study their methods, possibly to offer additional funding. You've changed this entire valley, Jonas told her, as they watched the state officials tour the schoolhouse, James toddling between them on increasingly steady legs. We've changed it, she corrected. None of this would have been possible without you believing in me from the beginning. I didn't believe in you at the beginning, Jonas admitted. I was going to send you away, remember, said, but you didn't. You saw my tears and chose kindness over convenience. That single moment of compassion changed everything. The state visit was a success, resulting not just in additional funding, but in Selena being invited to speak at an education conference in Denver. She was nervous about leaving James, now walking and getting into everything, but Jonas insisted she go. You have important things to say. The world needs to hear them. She spoke to a room of educators and legislators about the importance of rural education, about giving chances to immigrant children and those whom society had written off. Her speech was printed in newspapers across the state, inspiring similar programs in other communities. But success brought its own challenges. Letters arrived daily, now requests for help, for advice, for money. Selena tried to respond to them all, working late into the nights, until Jonas found her asleep at her desk, pen still in hand. You can't save everyone, he told her gently. No, but I can try to save some. She looked at him with those gray eyes that still captivated him. Every letter is someone's last hope, Jonas. I know what that feels like. Together, they established a system, hiring a secretary to help manage correspondence, creating a formal foundation to distribute funds fairly. The woman who'd arrived with nothing but a carpet bag now managed resources that could change lives. It was during the summer of James's second year that the biggest test came. A disease swept through the cattle herds of neighboring ranches, threatening to destroy years of work. The other ranchers, remembering how Jonas and Selena had helped them after Anderson's fall, came seeking advice. We need to work together, Selena said at the emergency meeting held in their barn. Pool resources, share information, treat this as a community problem rather than individual ones. Some ranchers grumbled about a woman telling them how to manage their cattle, but Jonas stood firm beside his wife. She's right. We survive together or fall separately. The cooperative effort worked, by sharing resources and knowledge implementing quarantine procedures. Selena had researched they managed to contain the disease with minimal losses. The incident cemented the Callahans' position as community leaders, people to turn to in crisis. James grew like a weed that summer, toddling after the ranch hands, learning words in English and Spanish and German from the various families who now called the expanded Triple C home. He had his mother's gray eyes, but his father's stubborn chin, a combination that promised interesting times ahead. He's going to be trouble, Tom predicted, watching the boy try to climb into a horse stall. The best kind of trouble, Selena said, scooping up her son before he could succeed, the kind that changes things for the better. That fall brought a harvest celebration, the entire valley gathering at the Triple C to celebrate survival and success. The European families contributed traditional dishes. Miguel's wife made tamales. Selena baked enough pies to feed an army. Musicians played, children ran wild, and couples danced under stars that seemed especially bright. Jonas watched Selena dance with James in her arms, the boy laughing as she spun him around, and felt that familiar tightness in his chest that came from loving something so much it hurt. Tom appeared beside him, following his gaze. Still can't believe she's yours. Every day, Jonas admitted. Every day I wake up expecting to find it was all a dream. Not a dream, boss. Just the result of one moment of compassion. You could have sent her away that first day. Most men would have. Then most men are fools. As the evening progressed, Jonas found himself remembering that first day, Selena stepping off the train with tears on her face, him standing there with a rejection letter in his pocket. How different their lives would have been if he'd followed through with his plan. He would still be alone in an empty house. She might be dead, another victim of Clayton's cruelty. James would never have existed. What are you thinking about? Selena asked, appearing at his side, James drowsing in her arms. That day at the station, how close I came to making the biggest mistake of my life. But you didn't. You chose kindness, Jonas. You chose to give a desperate stranger a chance. She leaned against him, warm and solid. And look what we built from that single choice. He looked around at the celebration, their neighbors, their friends, their community. The ranch that had been slowly dying when his mother passed was now the heart of the valley. The house that had echoed with loneliness was now filled with laughter and life. All because he'd been moved by a single tear. Dance with me, he said suddenly. James is almost asleep. Tom can hold him. Jonas handed the sleeping child to his foreman, then led Selena onto the makeshift dance floor. They moved together to the slow fiddle music, her head on his shoulder, his arms strong around her. I love you, he murmured into her hair. More than I did yesterday, less than I will tomorrow. That's mathematically impossible, she said, but he could hear the smile in her voice. Love doesn't follow mathematical rules. No, she agreed, lifting her head to look at him. It follows its own logic. The logic that brings a desperate woman and a lonely man together, that turns strangers into soulmates, that builds families from ruins. As they danced, Jonas noticed Sheriff Bradley talking urgently with Tom, both men looking concerned. His protective instincts immediately flared, but Selena tightened her arms around him. Whatever it is can wait until tomorrow, she said firmly. Tonight is for celebration, for joy, for us. She was right. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, it always did. There would be problems to solve, threats to face, decisions to make. But tonight, with his wife in his arms and their son safe with family, Jonas allowed himself to simply be happy. The party continued late into the night, but eventually couples began drifting away. Children were bundled into wagons, and quiet settled over the ranch. Jonas and Selena stood on their porch watching the last lanterns disappear down the road, James sleeping soundly in his bed upstairs. It was a good day, Selena said softly. The best, Jonas agreed. But as they turned to go inside, Sheriff Bradley's horse appeared in the yard. The sheriff dismounted, his face grim in the moonlight. I'm sorry to disturb you folks, but this couldn't wait. He pulled out a telegram. There's been a prison break in Denver. 3 men escaped, all former associates of Anderson. Word is they're heading this way looking for revenge. The peaceful night suddenly felt full of threat shadows, potentially hiding danger, but Selena merely straightened her spine, that familiar steel entering her voice. Then we'll be ready for them. We've faced worse and survived. Selena, Jonas began. No, Jonas. I'm not running anymore. This is our home, our life. We stand and fight. Bradley nodded approvingly. I'll post deputies keep watch, but you folks should take precautions. After the sheriff left, Jonas and Selena stood together in their kitchen, the same kitchen where she'd cooked her first meal for the ranch, where they'd shared so many conversations, where their life together had truly begun. Are you sure about this? Jonas asked. We could take James go somewhere safe until when? Until the next threat, the next enemy. Selena shook her head. Jonas, there will always be men like Anderson and Clayton, men who think they can take what they want through force or fear. The only way to stop them is to stand firm, to show them we won't be moved. Even with James to think about, especially with James to think about, what lesson do I teach him if I run? That bullies win, that fear is stronger than love. She moved into his arms, fierce and certain. We stay, we fight if we must, and we show our son that some things are worth defending. Jonas held her close, this remarkable woman who'd transformed from a tearful stranger into the strongest person he knew. All right, we stay. They spent the rest of the night preparing checking weapons, securing the house planning defenses. The hands were alerted, watches were set, and by dawn, the Triple C was ready for whatever came. But the escaped prisoners never arrived. They were captured 2 days later trying to rob a bank in Colorado Springs, their plans for revenge forgotten in favor of quick cash. The threat passed as quickly as it had come, leaving only the knowledge that they'd been ready, united, unbreakable. Life settled back into rhythm, the daily work of the ranch, James learning new words every day, Selena managing her various charitable enterprises. But there was a new quality to their peace, a depth that came from knowing they'd chosen to stand and fight rather than run. Winter came again, gentler this year, with snow that decorated rather than imprisoned. James, now talking in full sentences that mixed languages with charming confusion, demanded stories every night. His favorite was the one about how Mama came on a train and Papa fell in love with her tears. That's not how it happened, Jonas always protested. That's exactly how it happened. Selena would counter and then tell the story again, each time adding new details, new moments of magic. One evening, as Jonas watched Selena tell their story to James, her hands moving expressively, her voice painting pictures in the air, he realized something profound. The tear that had changed everything hadn't been sadness. It had been release. She'd been crying because she'd finally found her way home, even if neither of them had known it at the time. Spring brought unexpected news. The governor himself was coming to visit to see the school that had become a model for rural education, to meet the woman whose charitable work had gained national attention. The entire valley went into a frenzy of preparation. It's just a man, Selena said, though Jonas could see she was nervous. It's the governor, he corrected, and he's coming to see what you've built. What we've built, she insisted, as she always did. The visit was a success. The governor was charmed by Selena, impressed by the school, and delighted by James, who solemnly offered him a cookie and asked if he was a cowboy. But more importantly, he brought an offer. Mrs. Callahan, we need people like you in positions of influence. Would you consider serving on the State Board of Education? Selena looked at Jonas, a question in her eyes. He nodded without hesitation. She'd be honored, Governor. It meant trips to Denver, time away from the ranch, new responsibilities. But it also meant Selena could influence education across the state, help children she'd never meet have better opportunities. It was a chance to multiply the good she'd done in Iron Ridge. The announcement of her appointment made newspapers across Colorado. From mail-order bride to state official, one headline read. The article told her story, the desperate woman who'd stepped off a train with nothing and built an empire of compassion and change. They make me sound like someone special, Selena said, setting aside the newspaper. You are someone special, Jonas said, pulling her close. You always have been. That tear on your cheek just helped me see it. One tear, she mused. Such a small thing to build a life on. The best lives are built on small moments. A kind word, a second chance, a hand extended when it didn't have to be. He kissed her forehead. a tear at exactly the right moment.